Welcome everyone to Gippsland New Energy Conference 2024. As you can see from our reflections, it started from a smaller conference of 200 people in Wellington 2 years ago, doubled that to 400 in the following year, and this year doubled again to close to 800 people here in Gippsland talking about the future of new energy. Thank you for being part of it today. My name is Darren McCarthy. I'm the CEO of the Gippsland Climate Change Network, and it is my very great pleasure to be able to help organise this terrific conference. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not go too far before we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we are meeting today. Can I please welcome to the stage Auntie Christine.
Wow, it's a huge crowd of people. Good morning, everybody. I can tell you this morning was a bit of a challenge on what to wear because our weather at the moment is we're having 4 seasons in one. It's madness. My name's Christine Johnson, Womaninji, which means welcome. I grew up in Gippsland, in far East Gippsland as a little girl, moved to Latrobe Valley 45 years ago to study at the Gippsland Institute of Advanced Education. Very blessed to have parents that encourage us to go on to do further education, but also very important that we have a connection to country as traditional owners of Gunai Kurnai, Monero Ngarigo, and connection to Gujranamara country. A very warm welcome to Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples, the Premier, elders, community guests, visitors and staff. To acknowledge mob in the room from Gippsland, Gunai Kurnai, Monero Ngarigo, Bunurong, Bunurong, Yorta Yorta, and other First Nations people. And also the community that have come from far and wide. Thank you. We are meeting on country of the traditional custodians of the Brayakalong people of the Gunai Kurnai Nation. To the lands of our ancestors, the old people, past and present, I pay respect for their wisdom, guidance, knowledge, stories, resilience and the tireless work that they do in our communities. Brayakalong currently occupies the site of Sale, Province Pond, Avon, Latrobe Rivers, west of Lake Wellington to Mount Baw and Howard. There are 5 clan groups within the Gunai Kurnai people: Kratangalong, Tatangalong, Brattalong, Brabalong. Country is everything. It's family, it's connections, it is life. For 60,000 years, our ancestors can still be heard. The image presented behind me was a really special time because it was about an elder who made this canoe and thought it was really important for him to do it with his grandson. And it was done by my father, Albert Mullet, and his grandson in Far East Gippsland. This canoe is sitting in the Bunjalaka Museum in Melbourne. Dad really felt it was important that he passes on those knowledge and skills to his grandson so it continues on to the next generation. But the other thing is really important. Burun's canoe is a story of cultural pride and connection of knowledge that has been carried from time in memorable deep awareness and unbreakable link of Victorian Aboriginal culture. Our people have always been connected to the rivers, coastline, landscapes and mountains. Today we continue to place places, sites and stories is caring for our ancestral lands. Our cultural practices, our knowledge has shared down for the generations and for the next generations of all our young people that are in our communities. I'd like to share one of our creation stories, the story of the first man and woman, and I'm sure a number of you in the room would have heard this. But it's so important that we share these stories and that you can pass them down to your children and for your great-grandchildren, as we do, because that's something that I've grown up with around my great-grandparents travelling on country, up and down the coast, inland, along the coast, far east Gippsland. There was a time the first gunai, who was born the Pelican, came down from the mountains of the northwest and reached the level country. He crossed the Latrobe River near Sale and continued his journey to Port Albert. He was alone, carrying a bark canoe on his head. As he was walking, he heard a constant tapping sound, but look as he may, he could not find the source of it. At last he reached the deep waters of the inlet and put his canoe down. Much to his surprise, he saw a woman sitting in it. She was Tuck, the musk duck. He was very pleased to see her, and she became his wife and mother of all the Gunai-Kurnai people. As all Australians within our communities, we have a cultural responsibility in caring for country. Let's have a journey for our future generation, a cleaner, greener future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Gunai-Kurnai, and pay my respects to them and to elders in the audience with us today. I'd also pay my respects to the Bunurong peoples who are with us and other Indigenous people from around Victoria and Australia, Yorta Yorta and others. Thank you very much for being part of our conversation today. We really appreciate the respect that you've given us. Thank you so much. We'd like to now just go through some housekeeping of the conference, if I may. The conference is paperless, and so therefore we're asking you to download the Hoover app. You don't need any special codes or anything. You go onto the App Store and download the Hoover app. It's the blue one, the squiggly writing. And the email that you were given that we use for registration will automatically connect you in with our conference. That means that you can connect with other delegates. You can see what's happening in the expo hall. You can talk to other people. You can see the content of the program that we've got and interact with us. So it's the way that we let you know if there's any changes. So please download the app. There are screens around the venue which are helping you, but really it's the Hoover app on your smartphone that's going to determine your conference experience. If you're having problems with that, at the reception desk they can see that the email, if that's not correct, or if you do not have capacity to use a phone, then at the reception desk as well they have some hard copies of the various agenda items if you need those. The reception area is of course in rooms 1 and 2 down the end where you booked in. Now to understand, this is absolutely entire precinct. You're sitting in a 750 seat auditorium, but right down the corridor where your reception was is rooms 1 and 2 where some of the content will take place when we go to breakout sessions. And then if you go down that lovely pathway that Iberdrola has produced between here and the Little Theatre, you'll see the Little Theatre complex, but you'll also see the Expo Hall. Now all of our 57 sponsors and exhibitors and so on have set up within that area. It's a real buzz of excitement over there. And so please wander over to the Expo Hall and engage yourself within the conference, because whilst what's happening on the stage is important, it's really what's happening in the precinct of the conference that we'd like you to get you to do. Get to know people, sit around, enjoy. There's 2 lunch spots today. One will be in the outside in the alcove area and the other will be in the Expo Hall. So 2 places for lunches and morning breaks today. Understand too, the Women Energising Renewables Breakfast, it is actually, I think, just about sold out. So, but you can try on the, you have to have a ticket to go to that. It's a really cheap price to get in, and please go on that and do that. I must stress the bus tours today. We'd like you to register for the bus tour if you possibly can. Again, register through the registration area. This is a bus tour today at 11:15 going to if you want to see a working coal-fired power station, I think it's really exciting, but also hear a little bit about AGL's journey into renewables. It's a really fascinating story and you can get that up close and personal by going on a bus trip at 11:15. And if you're not from this area and you haven't seen it, go and have a look at it. There's also a tour over at the Aquatic Centre which is using geothermal power, and that'll be leaving at about 2:15 today. We'll meet in the front near the GNEC sign and they'll take you over to the Aquatic Centre and show you the plant room and how geothermal energy is being used. So please register for the bus if you can. There's also bus tours tomorrow which you can register for as well. well. Don't forget the coffee cups. We're having if you need a coffee anytime, you show your little badge at one of the coffee places. There are 3 coffee places around the precinct, one here out front, which is very, very busy, but there's also a coffee van in the precinct in the middle, and there's also a coffee stand being set up at the little theatre as well. If you show your badge, you get a free hot whatever you want, okay? So please just do that. We'd love you to be caffeinated throughout the conference, because you're going to need it, because there's a whole lot of stuff that's going to be happening throughout the entire conference, including our little assembly tonight. So tonight at 5 o'clock, there'll be drinks and a chance for you to network from 5 to 7:30, and hopefully from then you'll go out and enjoy the rest of the town. If you are enjoying the town and want a nice way to get home, we have our official community bus. Sandy is with us. It's a fully electric bus which will take you to your venue or pick you up or whatever. You just need to give Frank a text or call. Frank's in the audience out there. You can go and have a speak to him. He'll pick you up, take you where you need to go. He's kind of our own little Uber, but it's beautiful Sandy. It comes from Sandy Point, and that is a beautiful town. And thanks very much to Frank and the team for coming down with their electric bus, which is terrific. Just one more thing before we get started on the actual conference program. I'm going to invite Craig out to talk a little bit about the security in the very unlikely event that something's going to happen. We've got Craig from PASS who's assisting us with that. So Craig, if you could tell us what that means. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren, and what a great event. Keep safety simple. We're proud to be providing the safety and emergency response across the complex venue over the next few days, and also at Kernot Hall on the Thursday. In the unlikely event of an emergency or an event occurring, you have your exits on your left and your right. We'll make our way orderly outside the building, and the assembly point that's been nominated for this event is in the forecourt where the coffee cart is. I'm sure everyone knows exactly where that is. In the event that we need to further evacuate, our nominated area will be over to the Gippsland Recreation and Aquatic Centre located on K Street. You'll be guided across there. If you have any issues, we've got people in teal, we've got event organisers, or we've got the fire truck and an ambulance placed outside also. So hopefully you all have a safe and enjoyable experience, and we'll see you around over the next couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your support of the conference. Now, ladies and gentlemen who are standing up in the sides, I do need to get you to sit down too. As part of our security, we need to make sure that the aisles are not blocked. So if you can sit down, squeeze everybody up, just push them to one side. We're all friends here. Come on, we're all friends. It's the friendly conference. We've also opened up the upstairs. If you'd like to sit up there, that's now open. But please just shove across and let people from the aisles sit down. I'd really appreciate it. What a tremendous venue. What an amazing venue. Wellington has really looked after us over the last 2 years, but we've come to Latrobe this year and they have really opened their doors on a spectacular precinct. I know I'm a bit parochial here, but I love the middle of everywhere, but quite frankly, this is the centre of everything. And the person who looks after that, there you go, the person who looks after that is the Mayor of Latrobe. Please put your hands together for Councillor Darren Howe.
Thank you, Darren. My name's also Darren, but I won't be quite as exuberant as Darren McCarthy. But I'll start by thanking Auntie Christine for her wonderful welcome to country. And I too would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional land of the Brooklong people of the Gunai-Kurnai Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I'll also acknowledge any elders that are present with us today. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Latrobe City, it is a wonderful honour to stand here today at the Gippsland New Energy Conference, a gathering that showcases our collective commitment to a sustainable and innovative energy future for our region. It's a pleasure to host this important event on behalf of Gippsland, and I warmly welcome you to Latrobe City. I'd also like to acknowledge and extend a special welcome to Lily D'Ambrosio, Minister for Energy and Resources and Minister for Climate Action, Harriet Shing, Minister for Housing, Minister for Water and Minister for Equality. We've got Jess Walsh, Senator for Victoria, Councillor Ian Bye, Mayor of Wellington Shire, fellow councillors from Latrobe and from the broader Gippsland area. I'm confident that hearing insights from our guest speakers and panellists will provide us with valuable knowledge and hope about the future of the Gippsland region and beyond. As we gather here in Gippsland's commercial and industrial hub, Traralgon, at the Gippsland Performing Arts Centre, we are not just discussing ideas, we're a part of a movement, one which will have profound effects on our community, our economy and our planet. Long recognised as a powerhouse of energy generation, contributing significantly to Victoria's energy needs for over a century, Latrobe City is embracing the opportunity to redefine our future. As we transition from traditional energy sources that once underpinned our local economy, Latrobe City is committed to fostering new energy and innovation in support of the government's 2050 target of net zero emissions. Our transition plan focuses on industry diversification, economic growth and support for skilled employment. By attracting investment in renewable energy, we aim to provide sustainable and reliable alternative energy sources while also creating new job opportunities in these emerging sectors. We continue to actively explore alternative energy solutions, including geothermal and hydrogen, to support Latrobe's ongoing transition. The region's abundant natural resources make it a key player in decarbonising Australia's economy and supporting the global energy transition. Significant opportunity for wind and solar energy further enhances Latrobe's strategic advantages in this critical shift. The diversification of industry will reignite the region's role in the energy sector. Our strengths in manufacturing and engineering position us well to support offshore wind projects and enable the supply chain. We welcome the opportunity of proponents of these projects to leverage our region's unique strengths to maximise success. Our goal is to position Latrobe City at the forefront of sustainable energy solutions and as a hub for new energy innovation and development, including hydrogen technology. Our city is well positioned for hydrogen production due to our history of energy generation, industrial capacity and current infrastructure. The Japanese government's announcement of a $2.35 billion investment to establish an international large-scale liquefied hydrogen supply chain to Japan demonstrates the confidence in the hydrogen to energy supply chain pilot project, which successfully proved that Latrobe Valley brown coal can be used to produce clean liquid hydrogen. The project is built on the foundation of carbon capture and storage, which is essential to the viability and success. Without CCS, the HEX project would not succeed. This commitment to CCS not only supports the production of clean hydrogen, but also enhances the project's environmental credentials by significantly reducing emissions. Additionally, it opens the door to support other industries in their quest to achieve net zero. This large-scale investment supports our region's future economic growth by creating a new industry and high-value skilled jobs, positioning Latrobe City as a leader in the emerging hydrogen economy. Importantly, the HEX project recognises the region's highly skilled workforce and creates new career pathways. This investment, along with other in offshore wind industry, will be pivotal in ensuring a smooth and equitable transition for Latrobe City, allowing the community to fully benefit from the shift to renewable energy and the development of hydrogen technology. In April, the Latrobe Aerospace Technology Precinct at the Latrobe Regional Airport welcomed its first tenant, the Dovetail Electric Aviation Development Centre, in partnership with Dovetail and Invest Victoria. The centre is dedicated to advancing hydrogen technology by equipping regional aircrafts with batteries and hydrogen propulsion systems for zero-emission flights. This initiative not only addresses the environmental impact of air travel, but also significantly boosts the clean energy sector. An equitable transition to a new energy future means no one is left behind, and industry diversification, economic growth and skilled employment are supported. As we move towards net zero, the Council achieves significant milestones through projects and initiatives such as the landfill biogas renewable energy project. We installed a biogas generator at the Highland Highway landfill to use harvested methane to generate electricity, which produces up to 5,400 megawatts of power each year, increasing until 2032. We have geothermal technology. The Gippsland Aquatic Centre is the only public aquatic centre in regional Victoria utilising geothermal technology. This saves us around $640,000 annually and reduces our carbon emissions of around 840 tonnes. Achieving net zero is no small feat, but we are hopeful that this is achievable together. This conference represents a significant shared goal to move towards sustainable and economically diverse future together. Through conversations, groundwork and community-driven engagement, we hope to secure a brighter future for generations to come. With the closure of the Morwell Power Station, followed by the Hazelwood Power Station in 2017, and the upcoming closures of the Yallourn and the Loy Yang Power Stations and their mines, I'm proud of the strength and resilience our community has shown as we transition to a sustainable, more economically diverse region for all. Council will continue to work closely with our community. We are committed to championing the region's transition toward a sustainable future, with a steadfast focus on fostering innovation, attracting investment and creating opportunities that ensure long-term prosperity. With ongoing projects in renewable energy, advanced air mobility and industry diversification, Latrobe City is poised to lead the new energy economy, ensuring that our region not only adapts to change but thrives. I hope that the insights and engagements from this conference will highlight what is being done and what can be achieved, just as we are demonstrating right here in Latrobe. I thank you all for being part of this conversation. It's only through shared learnings and knowledge that we can help lead our communities to a better and cleaner future. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Darren. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Howe, and thank you very much, Latrobe, for their tremendous support of the conference. Can I give a shout out to Shay and to Glenn in particular, who've done a great job, and to Steve Piazzetti and the whole team and all the councillors out there. Thank you very much for making us so welcome. And really, a thank you to all of you from Gippsland who are here to have the conversation. Look, I get that this is a tricky time, the transition is a tricky process, but I'm really pleased by the fact that Gippslanders at this tricky time, we've had storms and all sorts of things, and you've come out to have the conversation. And I'm sure bunches of you aren't on board necessarily, but you are here to have the conversation about a renewable future. Because as Gippslanders, it's really important that we don't let this happen to us, but we let that happen with us. So we must come together and discuss the future so that we are comfortable about what's going to happen. And for those of you in the room that don't live in the most wonderful part of the state, I thank you for coming as well. Because we appreciate and understand that decisions about these things are made in Canberra and Sydney and Melbourne. We understand that, but it's very, very, very important that you come down into the regions which are mostly affected by the transition. You come down here and you make the case. You look people in the eye and you explain what you're going to do. You explain to them the benefits, the opportunities and the challenges of this transition. You come down here, we get to know you, we feel as if you're part of our community. We can't have these conversations in our capital cities, we must have them in our regions. And I thank all of you, those people from outside the region, that at this tough time, while your homes are probably, we've had a huge event over the last few days, you all know that, but you've decided to come down here, to travel hours sometimes, to be with us, to have a conversation with us. And we really appreciate that. And that gives me my segue to my next guest. The Minister is coming on stage, but the Minister comes here quite regularly and she absolutely understands that need to connect. And in fact, she comes down here quite regularly, that no longer do we call her the Honourable Minister, which I called her in the first year, or just simply the Minister, we just now call her Lily. She is Lily. She is our Minister, and she comes down here regularly and talks to us, and I think we should thank her for coming down here again. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the Minister for Energy, Climate Change, the SDC, Lily!
You have to laugh, don't you? Excuse me. Good morning to everyone. And thank you very much, Darren, for the introduction and the welcome, and for the musical entry. We are very strong believers, I think, in this room, but we're more than that. We're actually people who do things, and that's really the big part of it. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, and that is the Gunai Kurnai, the land of the Gunai. And my respects, of course, are to all elders of the past, the present, and the emerging, but also, of course, to other elders of other traditional owner communities who also might be here. And I want to reflect on the fact that our government is going through a process with our First Peoples here of Victoria on a journey of truth-telling and healing and treaty. And I think that's an important reflection for myself, to all of you. I do want to acknowledge Daniel Miller, the CEO of Gunai Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation. Senator Jess Walsh is somewhere. Hello, Jess, how are you? I'll catch you later. Senator for Victoria in the Federal Parliament. Martin Cameron, a member for Morwell, I think is going to be joining the conference at some point. Darren Howe, of course, Mayor of Latrobe City Council. Ian Bai, Mayor of Wellington Shire. Now, today it's my really a great honour for me to officially open the 3rd Gippsland New Energy Conference. But I want to open it with just some comments on where we are at the moment with respect to the massive storm and wind events that have swept through the southern part of the country, and in particular Victoria, in the last few days. And I do want to reflect on the fact there are still many, many parts of Victoria that are still waiting to be connected to energy supply, and particularly in this region, Warragul, Druin, Longwarry. We've got Moe, Yallourn, Trafalgar, East and South, Traralgon, and a number of other towns in between those areas, small communities also, that are still without power. And I know that there are crews working around the clock to clear roads, clear power lines, get power lines re-established, and get people connected back. And there are a lot of emergency workers out there, the SES, and of course the forest fire management staff, a whole range of people that are really out there helping communities, and I'm sure that some of you already might also be offline. So I wish you well. I mean, this is a journey that we've seen too many occurrences of in the last 3-4 years, but sadly that these are becoming more common, more frequent, and are becoming much more violent in their impact on communities. So all the more reason to keep us focused on the business that we're on today, and that is to decarbonise our energy system in the quickest way we can, in the smoothest way we can, all the while ensuring that we optimise the benefits for local communities in terms of the really terrific job opportunities that there are when we do this transition well. You can do it poorly, we can do it well, and I know which one we're all wanting to do it, and that is doing it well. And I'm really pleased to say that just 5 years ago, I don't know that such a conference here would have attracted the degree of buy-in from local communities as this conference has, and 3rd year running, but also, of course, the businesses from not just across the state and the country, but globally now, wanting to make a beeline for this conference every year. So I really want to congratulate all of you for believing, according to that song, but being tangible and practical with the solutions that are with us. And there are solutions that will come to us as this transition throws up a lot of other fantastic innovative changes that will make the transition one that we can truly be proud of. The scale of the opportunity is extraordinary, and the pace of change is impressive, and the potential for this part of Victoria is absolutely enormous. Now, I don't have to convince you of that. You're here because you believe that, and you know that to be true. And so I'm pleased to provide an update, if you like, on the strides in developing the offshore wind sector, which is a real unique opportunity for people in Gippsland, and also for Australia, because the learnings that are coming out of that will benefit not just, of course, Gippsland, but it will benefit the rest of Victoria, where we have great resources offshore, but also the rest of the country. I also want to talk about the progress VicGrid is making on our transmission coordination here in the region and more broadly as part of the first overarching Victorian transmission plan. And I'll also outline how we're working to deliver direct benefits to the region as part of this work through VicGrid's community and community benefit funds and landholder benefit funds and also traditional owner benefit funds. Now, we know offshore wind will play a crucial role in Victoria's electricity future as we move from the old technology that we have, which has served the state very well for many, many decades. And I say this because it is absolutely true. But we know that those days are limited, and what we're doing at conferences such as this is working out and activating the new technologies that will serve us well for many decades to come. Now, offshore wind is an essential part of our government's commitment to achieve 95% renewable electricity generation for ourselves by 2035 and reduce our emissions by between 75 and 80% by 2035 and to achieve net zero by 2045. Now, they are all ambitious targets, but the point is this, we've done our homework on this, they are ambitious but they are doable. And they are doable because we have the right policy settings in place and the right partnerships in place to be able to get there. These also are important to provide confidence to the investor community and to communities themselves, and that's why we've legislated also not just those targets but also our offshore wind energy targets, and they are to also indicate really squarely and clearly to what is very much a global investment community for offshore wind, that this subnational jurisdiction on the other side of the world is actually very serious about getting this done. So having policy setting legislation and then having the architecture for developing up how we're going to get to creation of at least 2 gigawatt of offshore wind energy by 2032 is so critical. And of course we aim to grow that to about 9 gigawatt by 2040. So just last month we released our new energy transition plan, electricity transition plan, that outlines the actions our state is taking to achieve these bold transition targets. And it is here in Gippsland, the nation's largest offshore wind zone, with 12 potential projects that we are seeing this burgeoning sector come to life. We're working very closely with federal government and local councils, and importantly the Grattan Land and Waters Aboriginal Corporation. Many project developers will be looking to take their first steps towards detailed project feasibility work, including preparing environmental studies and management plans. And just yesterday I joined GLAWAC as they launched Pathways to Partnerships, their strategic vision for working with developers and governments engaged in major projects on traditional lands and waters. And then as an active participant in the development of the offshore wind energy sector, GLAWAC has outlined our clear position and aspirations for offshore wind energy projects, as well as having early engagements with proponents. So we're proud to have provided funding to GLAWAC to support their self-determining needs and aspirations in adequately engaging with the sector and building their capacity to participate in the renewable energy transition. Now, before the end of this year, our dedicated body for offshore wind, that is Offshore Wind Energy Victoria, that is within the department, will release its 4th offshore wind energy implementation statement. And we'll also soon launch our auction for the first tranches of offshore wind, and this will include an expression of interest phase that will open up later this year and close in early 2025, followed by a request for proposal phase, and that'll close in early 2026. And the point of that is that we will award projects in late 2026. Now, transmission is critical. It's always going to be a critical part of transition. The new energy generated from offshore wind farms will need to connect to Victoria's power grid. And VicGrid, another agency within government, is developing the shared transmission line to connect offshore wind to the existing infrastructure in the valley. Our coordinated approach will avoid overbuilding on transmission lines across lands, which no one wants to see, and it will minimise the impact for the local community and the environment. The new transition lines will take time to plan and build, so we're not wasting any time getting going on this, and we're ensuring that we're well placed to hit our first offshore wind target of at least 2 gigawatts by 2032. So if you don't have transmission in place, you all know this better than most people in the country. If you don't have transmission, people aren't going to be building projects that they can't get connected and sell their power into the grid. So earlier this year, VicGrid announced a study area for the transmission to support offshore wind. So it's a study area. The point of it is to seek further detailed input from communities so that that study area can become refined and narrowed down to then become, if you like, the corridor for transmission. The extensive consultation and technical work is really critical. Right now, the study area starts about 6 k's from the coast near Griffith and travels northwest past Stradbroke West to Willung, across to Flynn's Creek and onto Loyang Power Station. Now, the proposed technology is a double circuit overhead transmission line. I hope you find this all very riveting. It's very good. It's good. I'll move on this more quickly, but the point is these are things that do take a long time, and I'm sure half the room here have worked on transmission lines probably anyway. So VicGrid has balanced a range of factors to make these decisions, including minimising impacts on landholders, communities, the environment, cultural values, and keeping down costs for consumers. So the idea is that the study area avoids major townships. Townships have a lower proportion of agricultural and private land than most other options, and allows us to explore alignment with existing infrastructure. Overhead transmission lines were chosen in part because they had much lower cost impacts to energy consumers and lowering engineering complexities. Since that announcement in March, VicGrid has been carrying out community sessions and engaging with landholders and First Peoples in the study area to share information, explain our decision-making process and ask questions. And very soon, VicGrid will share a summary of what it's heard during these sessions as VicGrid works to refine the study area into a corridor to continue to engage with the local landholders and community. This local knowledge is critical to helping us get it right. And of course, more broadly, VicGrid is also working to put in place a long-term strategic plan called the Victorian Transmission Plan. And that'll ensure we build the right amount of energy infrastructure in the right places and at the right time. So that means very soon VicGrid will, has released the draft Victorian Transmission Plan guidelines, and the aim is to have our first Victorian Transmission Plan released by middle of next year. And that will be a document that is updated every few years, but it is to provide a long-term view of the transmission needs across our state. So that more will be said, and many opportunities are yet to come to finalise that. Now, VicGrid community and traditional owner benefits are really important, of course, as are, of course, community benefits for landholders and broader communities. We have listened and we've come up with a new approach to delivering benefits that features the introduction of new community energy funds, payments for host landholders, payments for significantly impacted neighbours, and a commitment to co-design benefits for traditional owners. Now, all of these, known as community energy funds, will be set up to benefit communities in regions hosting energy infrastructure, with companies building new transmission, as well as the generators and battery developers that will be within our renewable energy zones. They will all be making contributions. Another thing we've heard from regional communities is a frustration that the energy transition is not always directly improving their local energy supply. So we see these funds as a chance to invest directly in projects that improve local energy outcomes and create other benefits for locals. Decisions about investments will be made in consultation with regional community reference groups, with broad community and industry representation. So, Gippsland, you are absolutely in the driver's seat. You have the ability, and I know have embraced the opportunity to shape your own future. And as a government, we are absolutely committed to work alongside you to ensure that you you're able to squeeze every opportunity and every benefit possible for yourselves. You've been blessed with fantastic resources now for many, many decades to produce energy, and you also, of course, are in a situation where you've got other newer resources that are so much resplendent here, where you're able to capture those new opportunities that will give you great outcomes locally. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing how all of that unfolds. I know it is a very strong and bright future, and it's one that I know that you are all absolutely committed to embracing. And I thank you very much for the opportunity again to be at this third conference. It is one that everyone talks about, and more people are talking about every year as the next one comes around. And with every year, you will be telling more stories about how you've grown the opportunities and extracting every benefit possible to develop up and utilise the skills and know-how that you've got here in Gippsland and repurpose it for another set of benefits for our local community, but one that will continue to sustain Victoria and be part of a national energy system. So thank you again and good luck. Thank you.
We do appreciate you coming down every year and introducing the conference to us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to move into our first session, and we will be looking at questions from the Hoover app, if we could. Pathways to Partnerships, Insight from Traditional Owners. And I'm going to welcome to the stage Paul Johnson, who's the Regional Manager the Senior Manager of Regional Engagement at Southerly 10, and of course, Daniel Miller, Chief Executive Officer of GLAWAC. Give them a huge round of applause, please. We thought it was really important for the conference to begin with a conversation in regard to dealing on country. And Daniel, we're going to go to you first, if you wouldn't mind, for the conference. You're talking about pathways to partnerships. Can you please just give us a bit of an insight into the conversations you've been having and probably more important, the lessons learned and the things that you're expecting in terms of these respectful relationships as we move through the partnerships program?
Sure. Thanks, Darren. And good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here in Brackalung country, of the Gunai Nation, and in beautiful Traralgon, but wet and cold at the moment. Sorry, and windy. It wasn't actually cold the other day. It's only just gotten cold yesterday, I think. And it's nice to be up here with Minister D'Ambrosio and Paul as well. So, look, I think I guess it was a year ago we sat here together and I talked about the importance of working with rights holders and First Nations people, and the Gunai people are rights holders in their own right. I guess we were thrust into a situation that is once in a generation opportunity to make a difference to the landscape and to our environment, and the Gunai people, to the credit, and GLAWAC has I guess listened to that call to action and tried to get organised in that regard, and it takes a lot of work, and we're not energy experts, but we are competent and interested in looking after Gunai interests and in the interests of country. And to that end, and I talked about this previously, we emphasise the importance of partnerships. So all of you bring something special to any conversation, and as we see it, we want to be a partner with all of you in the right manner, and that takes a bit of work to test each other and to find if there is a relationship there to be had. We've recognised that there's a lot of work, and it is a new space for a lot of companies and a lot of individuals to understand how to work with their First Nations people, and we hosted a dinner last night with the 10 offshore wind proponents and some other special guests, and that represented meeting number 5. So we've been doing this. This is the 5th meeting we've had with each of them. And I hope it was a really successful night. I thought it was. It was a good night. But it's been that's 5 meetings of working together and understanding each other's position and taking a bit of a journey, which I think Paul will talk to as well. We've progressed from the speed dating of meetings 1 to 4 to a collective night, which was really good. But what we wanted to do last night and again today is to launch a document which we're calling Pathways to Partnership, which is this one here. Which I don't think it doesn't present anything radically amazing. I think it just presents something that is, in lots of ways, common sense and you know, in a clear manner that steps out how to best work with GLAWAC and in essence create a partnership with First Nations people. And so those steps help us to test where we want a relationship to go, and I guess creates the trust and the respect that needs to be there. So this will be launched. This will be on our website soon. It's really launched now, and I encourage anyone to have a look at it. And this is the sort of stuff which is sort of the first step, in creating a partnership with First Nations people for us.
Excellent. Paul, I'm going to go to you now. Southerly 10, previously the artist formerly known as Star of the South, they've been here for a while now, over 5 years, and I think part of the engagement in Gippsland has come a lot through you. Can you just tell us a little bit about your pathway and your connection with GLAWAC and how you've built that relationship?
Sure, thanks Darren. Good morning everyone. So yeah, Star of the South, now Southerly 10, has been meeting with GLAWAC probably since 2017 about a whole range of things from when our founders Peter, Andy and Terry came on board. And our relationship has really developed since then. We have a really good understanding of the Gunai-Kurnai people's priorities, their aspirations, and particularly their culture, which I think is really, really critical. And I think it's important to congratulate GLAWAC on the work that they have done. They've really kind of set the benchmark for developers and made it very clear to us about what's important. So if you're jump on their website, have a look at the GLAWAC Whole of Country Plan, which came out in about 2015, and which clearly articulates the sort of priorities and aspirations for the Gunai-Kurnai people. But then as you drill down beyond that, there's 7 strategic objectives for a renewable energy strategy, which will be released soon. And then this time last year, GLAWAC released the Aspirations for a Better Future document, and they met individually with each developer and explained and articulated what their priorities were and what they saw as potential partnership opportunities for developers. So that has made our life, a lot easier as a developer, because GLAWAC has certainly got their house in order with regards to that. With regards to the steps outlined in this document that's being released today, the Pathways to Partnership document, step number 1 is showing respect. And I think we'd all agree that when you're having any type of relationship, respect is a foundation stone. And so what does that mean for us? Well, I meet with GLAWAC regularly, but when I meet with GLAWAC and it is about the partnership, it is about what does this look like? How can we work together over the course of the entire life of the project? I make sure that we've got, for example, our CEO Charles in the room, we've got Erin, our Chief Development Officer, in the room, and Daniel also has his senior staff there as well, because it really demonstrates that respect that we think is so important. If we're going to strike a partnership and we're going to be working together and continue to foster that trust over a long period of time, we need mutual trust to achieve common goals and mutual benefit.
Excellent. Minister, we might go to you now, if you don't mind, and your opinions of these pathways projects and working with traditional owners on country. What is your opinion and the government's point of view on that?
Well, we commend Gunai-Kurnai for the work that they have done. But can I just say that there are many traditional owner organisations, corporations across the state who are working on their own renewable energy plans. And it will mean different things to different parts of the state, different traditional owner communities. The opportunities will be different, but also the aspirations will be different, and we need to always remember that. But ultimately, the work that is underway that the Gunai-Kurnai people have in having that really clear objective and purpose of what they want to achieve through energy projects, and in particular offshore wind, is really pertinent in terms of matters that are about choice and self-determination for First Peoples in Victoria. And that is no different to how the conversations have been happening with government, if you like, more directly with traditional owner communities around what does treaty look like into the future. Now, I don't want to turn this into a discussion about treaty, but it all hangs together, if you like. And really, it's about what are the practical, tangible partnerships, relationships that need to be formed to ensure that the benefits of the transition that is well and truly underway now can be fairly obtained, if you like, right across the community and traditional owners, of course, in terms of their own self-determination and choices for how they see the relationship between themselves and this new fantastic resource that we're so lucky to have here in Victoria, and how traditional owners can be assured of a meaningful and rightful place in the discussions and the decisions that are made. So it is something that we're very committed to as a Victorian government. Things have to be done differently. Whilst we can't reverse the problems of the past that still remain, we can do things differently and better and facilitate meaningful aspirations and self-determination in the way that Gunai have articulated in their country and sea country plan, and of course the aspirations around renewable energy and in particular offshore wind.
Thank you. Paul, we might go back to you if you don't mind. You spoke about how you've been working as Southerly 10, and I know you necessarily want to preach to other developers, but there are other offshore wind developers in the room. What are your advice to them moving forward?
Well, I suppose when we look at partnerships, and we've got projects overseas as well, there is no one off-the-shelf model for a partnership with a traditional owner group. I think that's really important to note, and that was highlighted as well when the work that GLOAC did last year with their Aspirations for a Better Future document, where they highlighted some case studies of what's happening in New Zealand, what's happening in Canada. But because there's no off-the-shelf solution, it does represent fantastic opportunity, because it means that we can actually provide and design and co-design a partnership agreement with GLOAC, which is bespoke for the Gunai people, which addresses the needs and aspirations of this community. So that's first point, I suppose. Second is, for other developers, one thing that we've done which has been really beneficial is to understand more about Gunai people. So understand more about the culture, which is a remarkable culture. So things like visiting Gunai Kurnai's head office near Lake Centrance, undertaking cultural awareness training, visiting places like the Keeping Place in Bensdale, which is world class in terms of the information that it provides about Gunai Kurnai people. It's quite exceptional. But other, the Canoe Tree in Bensdale, the Knob in Stratford, Legend Rock in Meetung, these are all parts of the Gunai Kurnai story, and they really help inform us and educate us about what's important as we move forward. And also following the principles of self-determination, which the Minister mentioned a moment ago. But I think central to all of this is an understanding that if we listen carefully and engage deeply with GLOAC, we will absolutely produce a better offshore wind project with better outcomes and leave a greater legacy. And that's a really key tenet for this whole conversation.
Thank you, Paul. Daniel, I'm going to go to the Hoover app now. I did a minute ago, now it's just disappearing. Somebody was asking about this partner-based partnership. Will that form part of the renewable energy strategy document that GLOAC are preparing?
It did initially.
Yeah.
And we've since, I guess, made it a bit less specific to renewable energy, and there is some examples in here, but it's designed now for any sort of major project. The principles in here are around doing any partnership with GLOAC on any major initiative. So we'll definitely use it. We talked to the offshore wind proponents last night about it, and we'll continue to do so. But as the Minister mentioned, we've got some old energy projects which we're looking to sort of create some partnerships with, and these same principles apply. So it'll be relevant to all our major works going in the future. So once it's on the website, we encourage everyone to have a look and to try and make sense of it and ask some questions and interact with us on it.
Good. And the last question, maybe I'll go to you, Minister. Just if you got any comments to from what you've heard, anything you'd like to finish with?
Look, I'm very, very pleased to see how well the engagement is going between Grattan and the proponents of offshore wind here in Gippsland. We also need to reflect on the fact that whilst we are very new at doing what is being done right now and the conversations around it, there have been many opportunities and partnerships struck, if you like, globally with First Nations peoples around many, many different types of infrastructure projects, no less so energy, also in the mining sector too. So we've come on a real journey, I think, and we are all learning. We continue to learn how to do it well. And I think, though, that one thing that will see us through to getting good outcomes that communities can feel very satisfied with is the fact that we all come at this with a really strong sense of goodwill and partnership to get the outcomes that hopefully will meet aspirations of traditional owner communities, because ultimately also it gives us all better projects, but it also gives us a stronger community that we all benefit from.
Thank you, Minister. And ladies and gentlemen, can you please put your hands together for Paul Johnson, Daniel Miller and Minister D'Ambrosio. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. We'll move on to the next in our program, and I apologise for running a little over time. I'd now like to welcome onto the stage somebody who was with us in the first year of the conference and has now returned, and I'm sure you can see the difference in over those 2 short years. I'd now like to welcome to the stage the Director of the Energy Program at the Grattan Institute. Can you please make welcome Tony Wood?
Good morning. I have made a point telling my office that this is one of the events that I need to get to every year, because, not because I like the Gippsland area, which I do, but primarily because this is a perfect example of both the challenges and the opportunities that face Australia and, to be fair, the rest of the world in the transition to net zero. And it is amazing how so many people have realised how important this transition is and are here for these couple of days. All right, so the point I want to make to start with is that every part of our lives, every part of our economy is going to be affected in some way by this transition. This is the next industrial revolution. And if you think that your life is not going to be affected either by a changing climate or by what we're going to do to address the changing climate, I suggest you're wrong, and you might want to think about it a bit more, because the nature, the scale and the pace of change is quite transformative, which offers, not surprisingly, with the benefits that come from this transition, also challenges. And to some extent, we are in the difficult part of this transition, and I'll explain why as I go through these slides. But there's the areas of our economy, which I've listed here, such as a gas system that we've had in Australia for over 200 years, well before we had electricity. We're going to shut it down. We are going to shut it down. And that is quite a confronting challenge for many people. I spent my first years in the energy industry working in the gas business, and we were teaching. We had cooking schools teaching young women, they were almost always then young women, and the boys were doing woodwork, how to cook with gas. How to cook with gas. We're going to shut the gas industry down in the next 25 years. That is an extraordinary change. And all the other changes I've put up here are just as transformative. So what I'm going to do in the next 20 minutes or so is talk a little bit about where we are, how things are going, and also a little bit about what we could expect in the next little while. The last one, do not hold me to any of it, because anyone who does analysis of where this is all going to go will be wrong. The only question is in which bits and by how much. So, the first part of this, when you look at it, step back from this a little, looks not too bad. I mean, that's not exactly a steep slope. It basically says if we're going to go from where we were in 2020 to net zero by 2050. That's where we have to get to. And the way this is all framed in the formal commitments that countries like Australia make in the International Paris Agreement is that we commit to not just a point in time, which for Australia is to reduce our emissions by 43% below what they were in 2005 by 2030. The actual more important number is between 2021 and 2030, we have what's called a carbon budget. And the reason the carbon budget is an interesting term is because, like a household budget, if you overspend your budget and you have to borrow money, you've got to pay it back. And the same thing happens in a carbon budget. And what this chart shows is we are actually treading right now ahead of or above the budget line, which is where those two dotted lines are. And the reason those dotted lines then go below the top of the grey triangle is because we have to pay it back. And the more we spend above, the harder it gets to pay back later. So that's why this is challenging. Talking a little bit more closely about how things are actually going in a bit more detail. This line shows the solid line, this orange line, shows on a annualised quarterly basis how we've been going since 2005, which is the baseline against which all this is measured, both in Australia and for other countries. And this shows that for the last 3 years, we've basically been flatlining. That is, our emissions have not been going down in the same way that the trend was heading. And that means some challenges ahead. The reason why that's happening, when you look at the detail, is a bit messy, and I'll show you how that's made up. But the tricky thing here is that, as you can see clearly, even though the overall trend looks not too bad, the challenge is if that last 3 years of the orange line continues, then life gets difficult. We actually reduced emissions on an annualised basis in the last 3 years by about 2 million tonnes a year. Now that means we're going to have to do 15 million tonnes a year every year between now and 2030. That's not, they're not diabolically difficult numbers, but they're not easy either. So turning this chart down becomes important. This chart shows how that was made up. And again, going back in this case to 2005, these are the different sectors of the economy. And it looks a bit like a mess, in a sense. They're all over the place. One of the reasons is we don't have a single economy-wide carbon price. That became politically too difficult. We are now left with a situation where all the focus is on the individual sectors of the economy. And what's been happening there is somewhat interesting. You can see the orange line at the very bottom of this chart is electricity. Electricity generation has done most of the heavy lifting for the last 20 years. And the challenge there is it's starting to slow down a bit for some of the reasons that you would know about and the Minister referred to, in particular the challenges of building transmission to connect renewables. We had the advantage up until recently of the fact that our transmission system had lots of capacity to build and attach more wind farms and solar farms. We've used that up. To continue to grow that renewable share requires that we continue to build transmission, or we build new transmission, and you all would appreciate how difficult that's been and how significantly everybody underestimated how difficult the challenge would be, and it's proved to be very difficult indeed, and that's one of the major impediments. On the other hand, other things have also been going on. So you can see here the second line, the blue line from the second from the bottom, is agriculture. Agriculture tends to respond mostly to changes in stocking of land and seasonal things. So that's very little driven by anything to do with policy. It'll go up and down as the stocking, particularly of sheep and cattle, changes, because it's the enteric fermentation, let's call it burping and farting, that causes the problem in the agricultural sector and creates more of a difficulty if you're going to bring these emissions down. And then the other one, I guess, which is interesting to look at is the very top line. Transport, the black line, is interesting because it's taken a dip up recently, and that is still largely a recovery from the very low levels of transport that we saw relatively during the COVID period. And finally, the top red line is stationary energy. Now, a lot of that's driven by things like fugitive emissions from coal mining and LNG production. Very large amounts of emissions, and again, LNG production and coal mining are things which we're going to have to stop doing. And that's not something that the gas industry appreciates, and particularly given we've got some challenges in moving down that path, particularly in places like Victoria, where we want to get off gas, but not yet because we aren't yet ready to do so, becomes one of the challenges of balancing this up. So this chart shows where are we now in terms of the policy mechanisms that governments are trying to use. What are governments trying to do to move those lines down? Because all of them have to turn around if we're going to get to net zero by 2050. And remember, we have bipartisan support for net zero by 2050. Hell of an argument going on, as you would know, about how we do the first little bit and what some of the technology mix might be, but that commitment to net zero by 2050 remains in place, despite, as you'd be aware, some of the debate that goes on inside the coalition of Liberal and National parties. The electricity side is driven largely by continuing growth in renewables, but also, and it was referred to earlier, things like the closure of coal-fired power stations. We've seen the closure of Hazelwood. In fact, the first of one of these events I came to in Gippsland was not long after the Hazelwood power station had closed down. And that was when generally the atmosphere was pretty negative about what that future looked like. But we're now looking at the closure of Yallourn and Loy Yang A and eventually Loy Yang B, and whilst that is certainly challenging for everybody involved and particularly for the people who are employed in those facilities, the future broadly looks like something is more manageable. Not simple by any means, but manageable. Degasification or moving away from gas to electricity is almost certainly the answer for most of the areas where we currently use gas. Not all, but most. Heavy industry, not so simple, and hydrogen may have a role to play there. Transport, we know how to now. We know how to move away from internal combustion engines to electricity. Now, again, not simple. We've already seen a bit of a slowdown globally because of the concerns about range and the concerns about getting charging. I mean, I drove down in my EV last evening. I had trouble finding a place where I could charge my EV, make sure I could get back to Melbourne later today. I found one, and it's all done. The car's fully charged, but it's not simple or straightforward, and sometimes you've just got to spend a little bit more time on these sort of things. We do have a policy. I indicated before we don't have a economy-wide policy on climate change. We do have a specific, significant policy that hasn't yet started to really bite, and that's called a safeguard mechanism. It's effectively a carbon price on heavy industry. And broadly speaking, heavy industry have supported this policy, which given the history of industry in this country is somewhat surprising. Industry has now recognised this is a challenge, but the opportunities that lie there for companies to get on board with this stuff far outweigh in the longer term the challenges of getting there. And so the safeguard mechanism is something you will hear about more in the next couple of years. And then we have offsets, which I won't cover now because it's a bit of an esoteric problem, but what it refers to is the idea that we take CO2 out of the atmosphere. What you do with it next is not simple, but the idea that we could take out CO2 out of the atmosphere is one way to do that, and the other way to reduce emissions in the atmosphere is things like planting trees or recarbonising our soils. Both of those last two are open to enormous debate in academic circles as to whether or not those emissions reduction technologies are valid and whether they actually have environmental integrity. And so the opportunities for removing CO2 from the atmosphere, while they can sound really exciting, are far more challenging. What we'll hear about in the next little while is where we're going next. Now, the Climate Change Authority, which was set up by the Rudd government, it was largely emasculated by the coalition, not by getting itself shut down, but by basically de-staffing, so they couldn't do very much, and governments not showing much interest in what the Climate Change Authority was saying. The Climate Change Authority has two roles. One is to advise the Parliament on what Australia's emissions targets should be, and the other one is to report or provide the detailed report for the Minister to report back to Parliament on how we're going. They've now taken that more seriously, and that organisation, which I think went from about 60 people in its heyday down to about 4, is now well back to where it used to be because it's got some hellishing difficulty work and very important work to do. The first thing they'll be doing is looking at the perspective of what has to happen in those sectors I just mentioned across the next 25 years to get to net zero by 2050. So in each of the sectors, what can we do when? Because when you think about it, any of you who work in industry would know, even in homes, that one of the impediments to change is capital turnover. You don't throw away perfectly good gas appliances and replace them with electricity just for the fun of it. What you do need to think about is when's the best time to do that. The best time, obviously, is when the one you've got today runs out. The challenge is to make sure you're ready for the changeover at the house level and also at the business level. Because at the business level, every time a major company with their major assets might, for example, replace them every 15, 20, 30 years. I mean, we replace, cars get replaced every 15 years or so. Same sort of deal with industry, but often the numbers are much bigger. So every time a major industry replaces a gas-based technology with gas-based technology, you've locked in emissions for another 20 years. And given we've only got 25 years to get to net zero, you can see why the maths starts to become important. So the Climate Change Authority will report on that. And they'll also recommend on what Australia's next target should be. I mentioned before, our current target is 43% below 2005 levels by 2030. The Climate Change Authority put out an initial advice to suggest maybe 65 to 75%. You may remember that the coalition government had a target of 26 to 28%. We're actually now pretty close to 30%, where we are now. So we can get to the 43, as my chart showed before, but then we go, where do we go next? And so there will be a lot of discussion, to say the least, and a lot of political debate when the Climate Change Authority prepares and releases publicly its advice to the federal government on what our target should be. And those blue and green bars on the right-hand side show some of the enthusiastic proposals that have been made by various organisations as to where they think we should get to. So you can see there that organisations like the Climate Council, who are a very strong advocate for strong action on climate change, who would say if we don't get this done sooner, we are all really in a big mess. They would argue we should be looking to net zero by 2035. Now, when you think about what I was just saying before about what has to change in the next 10 years, you will realise what the challenges would be to getting to that sort of target. But it's interesting to have that full range of arguments being put forward as to where our target should be. So where the Climate Change Authority will land, we don't know. What happens next is that the government of the day, and unless there's an early election, will be the current government. They will decide what our target for 2035 should be. It's not just a domestic target, but it's also a commitment that Australia makes to the international agreement. And that has to be done in the first quarter of next year. Now, the interesting challenge, of course, would be that you've got an opposition federally in Australia who's arguing that they don't think we should keep the existing 2030 target, but we are a signatory to an international agreement. And so staying inside that agreement, but not meeting our targets, will become a more than interesting debate if there was to be a change of government. It may be a question that the opposition will have to address in the move towards the next election. So I've tended to talk a little bit about some of the challenges. There are huge opportunities for countries like Australia and also for areas like Gippsland. Here's a couple I just pulled out from some reports we've been doing looking at some of those opportunities. One of them is ammonia. Now in Australia, as in many parts of the world, we make ammonia from natural gas. Ammonia is used is turned into two things. One is explosives, ammonium nitrate, which is used in mining, and the second one is for fertiliser. Ammonium nitrate also, which is used as a source of nitrogen fertiliser. Turns out that ammonia, which is made up of nitrogen and hydrogen, is a very good way of transporting hydrogen because it doesn't need to be chilled down to minus 250 degrees centigrade. And it can also be burned in power stations, like natural gas. So ammonia is a really interesting opportunity. And also, given that heavy shipping around the world depends upon a thing called bunker fuel, which is horrible stuff, particularly for emissions, ammonia can also be used as a marine fuel. And there are already, some of you may have seen, Twiggy Forrest launched a ship not very long ago that partly runs on hydrogen, partly runs on ammonia, partly runs on ammonia. So you can see this chart shows the huge potential growth internationally of ammonia. If Australia could be a producer of that ammonia through making hydrogen from renewable energy, that provides a huge opportunity for Australia. The right-hand chart shows a little bit about these things called critical minerals. Australia, not only do we have a large country with a lot of wind and solar resources for a relatively small population, we've also got an unusually large share of the world's mineral resources. You may know already that we are a major provider of things like iron ore into the iron and steel industry. We're also a major producer of bauxite and alumina and aluminium, all of which are different stages of making aluminium. In addition to that, we also, and this chart shows a bit of this, we have a significant share of the world's known lithium, cobalt, manganese, and those sorts of things, which are essential to the transition to electricity, particularly for solar panels and electric vehicles and all those sorts of things. Now, in this particular case, the important point is not to get carried away. Well, we should just do all this. If we've got lithium, why don't we make batteries? If we've got silicon, why don't we make solar panels? You've got to really spend some time on the basic economics. If we have got in Australia a comparative advantage of the mineral resource in existence, and we've got competitively priced renewable energy, then where the processing of those minerals involves in energy and is energy intensive, that's where the opportunities lie. A simple example. Right now, the Chinese government, the Chinese industry, has the capacity to produce more than double the total world demand for solar panels. We should not think about competing with them. Even though the Prime Minister seemed to think making solar panels is a good idea. It's not a good idea. We won't compete with the Chinese. We will not out-subsidise the Chinese government. What would be an interesting idea is if you start with the raw material that goes into the solar panel, which is basically silicon, and silicon oxide, like iron oxide and aluminium oxide is a mineral. The first part of that process of turning that silicon oxide or sand, basically, into silicon, which then goes into solar panels and computer chips, is energy intensive and uses right now a lot of carbon. That's an opportunity for Australia, and that's where the sort of logic should be applied to how we grapple with and take advantage of these opportunities. Because if we were to get anything like our share of the global demand for these critical minerals that we know is coming, we could easily double the export revenue that Australia gets from exporting coal and gas today. Easily double. And yet there's an opportunity there to be grappled with. So, is it all too hard? We published a report a little while ago that showed where we were up to and explained why we had to get, what had to be done. Some of the stuff I've already spoken about. Part of the mainstream media, I'll give you a clue, the Australian. One of the journalists there basically said, look, even the left-wing Grattan Institute, which I take sort of a, given I get accused of being a right-wing, gas-based, industrial executive at times, I don't mind that so much. But what annoyed me was what they said, and this shows it's all too hard. Well, if we decide it's all too hard, then some of you may be old enough, as I am, to remember a guy called Tom Lehrer who wrote a song called We'll All Burn Together When We Burn. Now, I am seriously not trying to catastrophise what happens with a changing climate. But this is not a problem where we've got a choice. We know what the answer is. The only challenge is how we get there and how well we do it. Because as Lily said before, we can do it well or we can do it badly. And so some of the things that you need to keep an eye on if you're interested in following what goes on in the next little while will be how we change our focus from 2030 to 2035, how we sort out the challenges of building transmission in regional Australia. It is a serious problem and it needs to be fixed. Coal closure is a trick. I mean, you know, I'm sure that the Victorian government has entered into commercial deals with the owners of 2 of the coal-fired power stations in Victoria, as did the New South Wales government with the owners of 1 of the large coal-fired power stations there. I do criticise the Victorian government because I think not that they did this, taking out insurance is not a bad idea, but the way they did it is that those deals are confidential. I think they should be public, as the one in New South Wales is public. Because if you're competing with somebody else who's got a special deal with the government, you should know how uneven that playing field is if you're going to have a sensible market. But otherwise, taking out that insurance is not a bad idea. We do have the Future Made in Australia policy, which is currently going through Parliament. Basically, that is trying to identify that in a very specific way what I was talking about in relation to Australia's comparative advantage. What this is saying, and it was in the budget this year, is the government has committed $22 billion to Future Made in Australia. The important thing is that they are going to use what's called the national interest framework. And that is, our national interest lies in how do we get to a net zero economy and where Australia has comparative advantage. And it should be the case that both of those are satisfied. And the reason this legislation is taking a little while to get through Parliament is because it's complicated and because there is a debate going on as to whether or not we should be doing this or not. Because industry policy can be tricky. But if you get it right, it opens up those opportunities I talked about for Australia. There's a big issue going on with gas. As I said before, we've got to get off gas, but not yet. And I mean, some of you who brought up in a Catholic environment as I was would remember St. Augustine, Lord, make me pure, but not yet. And so this is a bit like that. The challenge is here's a simple statement. Victoria is running out of gas, and there currently is no solution. And when I say that, I have to stop myself. That can't be true. What? I mean, we've had a reliable source of gas. We've exported gas to the rest of Australia for the last 50 years. How can that possibly be true? But it is. I think it's a terrible failure of public policy, but also of industry, because no one has seriously been able to grapple with, okay, what do we do? We're not getting off gas fast enough. There are no local sources of gas big enough. Pipelines are not big enough and can't be built fast enough. And even if you were to build a pipeline, it could be a stranded asset in 20 years. What do? So solving that gas challenge is an issue of some importance. We're having a go at that at the moment, and I'm not sure we've got an answer, but there's certainly going to have to be some answers. And also, I mean, the technology issues will unfold as they will. There'll be technologies emerge we don't even think about today, but some of them, as you'll hear about, there'll be further discussion about nuclear in the next little while. There'll be more discussion about hydrogen, which is proving to be not as positive as many people hoped, but still will be significant, and particularly in places like Victoria, where carbon capture and storage has been an issue for a long time. You'll hear more about that as being part of the solution. But technology will be developed with good policy. And then finally, there will be the international world. I mean, no one really, I don't think, thought about how significantly the Ukraine war would have an impact, not just on the world in terms of geopolitics, but on energy. One of the reasons why our energy prices have gone up is because of what the Ukraine war has done to the global energy supply and demand. So energy and climate change are therefore caught up in politics. Now, it is, I think, a great pity that we allowed climate to become a war in Australia. I don't think it was driven by ideology. I think it was driven by politics. And I don't think it was because in many parts of the world, conservative sides of government have supported conserving the planet. But in Australia, we decided we'd have a battle about it, and largely that was driven by the politics of the early part of this century, particularly when Tony Abbott became leader of the opposition. He saw an opportunity, and he did. He took tremendous advantage of that opportunity, and so it played out. This cannot continue, and we'll see how, between now and the next election and beyond that, how the politics play out on this energy transition, because it is too important for us to fail. Thank you.
Spot on, mate. Spot on. Good on you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We've just got a couple more things before we break. We're going to now invite onto the stage a Gippsland legend. So we've heard from Tony, but now we're going to bring up a Gippsland legend, the founder of Gippsland Solar. Please make welcome Andy McCarthy. G'day, Andy. How are you? That's good. Now, the challenge is that we've got two of the most excitable people in Gippsland here in the one place. So this could go really awry. But anyway, we want to get a Gippsland perspective. You've been around for the last 10 years. You've seen what's happened. We've seen the transition journey that we're all on. Can you give us a bit of a flavour about where we've come from and where we might be heading? So let's start. Where did we come from? Tell us about your last 10 years.
Okay, thanks Darren, and thank you for stealing the line that I fed you backstage about the two most excitable people in Gippsland. He said, I'm going to steal that. Well, look, I think it's moments like this we stand here in front of hundreds of people and we take a moment to appreciate how far we've come while not losing sight of how far we still have to go. I mean, I think about my own journey. I've been in renewables now since 2001 when I was 19 years old. When I moved here in 2010, I had a firm belief that everyone realised we were transitioning and it was just a common sense thing that we all just agreed. It was obvious. Our trading partners were adopting net zero targets and I just didn't feel like there was any ambiguity about our energy future. And then I came down the Prince's Highway and realised that that attitude was very different in the Latrobe Valley. And I think back then, solar might have been 0.05% of the nation's electricity mix. Less than 1% of homes in Traralgon and Morwell had solar on the roof, and most people didn't think it was ever going to move beyond what was often called a niche market for greenies and lefties. So that was really where things were at in 2010. And even by 2015, I had businesses that would install solar as long as we put the solar panels on the back of the building where the customers couldn't see them, because they would directly connect the installation of a solar panel with putting Joe from Loyang out of a job. And so those attitudes of, very understandable too. It took me a long time to realise that what drove the psyche of the region here, and I had to pull my head out of my backside. I think I admitted to in my book about my approach being all wrong. On our own business journey, which I think is kind of a microcosm of the broader transition, I feel like that the year 2014 where I realised my approach was wrong and I had to stop and meet people where they were rather than just being too combative all the time. It's really important for me when I reflect on the fact that we enjoyed some business success in the early years, but until we actually brought people on the journey, that was when we truly started to explode and really thrive as a business, because there's no point, disappearing into echo chambers or continuing the culture wars. You have to meet people where they are and you have to understand what's driving their thinking, and then together we can see the results of that now in 2024 when we have so many people from all over Gippsland and the Latrobe Valley coming together to talk about renewable energy. It's fantastic.
So we're on the brink of something really exciting. Well, I believe we are anyway. Are we ready for it? Do you think Gippsland is ready to do this? Tony's just done a presentation which finished with, net zero. Are we up for it? All that sort of stuff. Are we up for it? Are we up for it, mate? Do you reckon we can do this?
It depends what day you ask me, because sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and I don't pull any punches. I'm honest about this sort of thing. There's no point standing up here and talking about this amazing journey and the unequivocal mission that we're on to net zero in the valley, and we have all these speeches and we hear all these wonderful positive sound bites, but sometimes you go into the community and you have meetings out in the real world and it's not like that. So let's not make the mistake, because hundreds of like-minded people are gathered together today. Let's not make the mistake of thinking that the work's done and that our vision and our pathway is extremely clear for people in the Latrobe Valley and in the broader region as well. I think it would be silly to do that. It would be too complacent, because there is still a lot of work to do. And I think it's on all of us. Minister D'Ambrosio spoke about this recently in an event that I did with her, where she said, I get to come down here and make announcements and go back to Spring Street, and I don't walk the streets every day. I don't have those conversations. I don't feel the hostility and the resistance and the fear, the uncertainty and the doubt that people have about this energy transition. And I think, as we've heard several times today, that's the most important thing, is to understand that we see opportunity coming with the energy transition. A lot of other people see opportunity leaving, and that doesn't have to be the case, but it's all about the way that we tell the story and we prosecute the case and show people that this is actually a very, very positive thing for the region. We don't have a choice in whether we transition, but it doesn't mean that it can't be a positive thing and that our best days can't be ahead of us.
Yeah, it's really important to do that. Thank you. Lastly, I've heard a rumour, and I don't know whether it's true or not. You might have written a book. Okay, I don't know whether you have, but do you got any details about that at all?
I noticed a couple of people leaving the studio audience when you moved into the self-promotion phase, so I'll make this one quick. Yeah, look, I had a crisis of identity when we sold Gippsland Solar to RECV, and I finished up and I thought, well, I'm not Andy from Gippsland Solar anymore, so who am I? Took 6 months off with the family, went travelling, and then I thought, what's next? So I decided to write a book really as a cathartic thing to help me, deal with a bit of an identity crisis in my life, and then got to the end and never intended to publish it, but someone picked it up and said we need to tell this story. It's a story of transition in moving to a region and trying to bring people on the journey with you. It's also a book full of all the mistakes I made and the scar tissue that I built up along the way. It had a significant impact on my own mental health. I went off a bit of a proverbial cliff in 2018 and spent 6 months physically unable to work. So I think it's an important reminder that this work that we're doing is very stressful and very challenging sometimes. And like a lot of you, I'm very driven and passionate about it, but also failed to look after myself along the way as well, and realised too late for a period of time that you can only look after others when you look after yourself first. So I wanted to capture all those things into central repository and sort of talk about my journey, but not through a valedictory tour of all the wonderful things our business achieved, but also the mistakes I made and the things that I regret, the self-loathing and the shame that comes in at times of being a poor husband and father because of your passion. So it's a little bit of everything. I've had some wonderful conversations over the last month or so since the book was released, and the impact it's had on people to realise my upbringing was really poor. I was pretty poorly educated and didn't really have anything going for me. And so I want people to understand that if you have a passion and you really believe in where you're going, that you can achieve anything, and I hope that's what the book will do for people.
And thank you, Andy. I know that you're coming back to talk to us on the last day. I know that you'll be around the conference selling the book, and please, if you want to do yourself a favour, as they say, get yourself a copy of his book, because he's an absolute legend. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Andy McCarthy. Good on you, mate. Almost there, ladies and gentlemen, almost there. Just a couple of short things. We're trying very hard as a conference to be sustainable this year, and we thank Iberdrola, who are actually paying to have green power over the next couple of days. Thank you very much for that. But to talk about our sustainability initiatives, I'd like to talk to our sustainability coordinator, and with the help of Southerly 10, our sustainability partner, I'd like to bring David Hood out, who's going to talk a little bit about that. David, Hoodie, or we call him Scabbers. Okay, here we go. So let us know about what they have to do during the conference to keep us sustainable.
Yeah, thanks very much, Darren. So I got voted into the Sustainability Manager gig while I was on leave in February. So there's always a bit of a warning there. But I think there's a reason why I got that gig, is because after 2022, the first New Energy Conference, I was standing giving out some show bags that we had arranged, and a few people saying, what's in them? Can I have a look? No, thanks, not for me. And I had a look in myself, and I saw a few things in there, things that were wrapped in single-use plastic, a few items in there that were probably just throwaway items. And I said to Darren afterwards, is there a chance we can do better in 2023? And he said, yep, let's do it. He embraced it. There were things that we brought in for last year that were certainly a step above the first conference that we had. So we introduced some sustainability guidelines for sponsors and stall holders, asking them to think about what are the items that you're bringing to give away. Think about some of those items instead of giving them something that's might be fun and with some branding, but think about something that they can use again and again rather than something that might just end up in the bin straight away. So Darren was very much on board with that and really supported that. We've got boomerang bags on board, so I hope people have picked up their boomerang bags. If not, we've got plenty down there. Find something that matches your personality, your spirit, your vibe. There'll be something in there that you can take home. If you've already got one, give it away to someone else who might want to use it. These are sort of the themes that we hope that you can pick up. If you're here to run a project in Gippsland, if you're here to support a project in New Energy in Gippsland, we hope that theme really sticks with you in terms of what can we do that's better? How can we support the community? How can we source items, get items, have that thought behind them that really make sure that they're not just that sort of throwaway or something like that might just end up either in landfill, that sort of thing. So that's certainly a theme that we're really hoping that you pick up from this conference. A couple of other things that we've done, hopefully through the Hoover app you've seen that we've encouraged you to bring your own keep cup, bring your own water bottle. We've got the stations here to fill up your own water bottles if you need to. If you bring your own keep cup, we've got some rinse stations, places where you'll be able to rinse them out so you can use them again and again during the day so that you're not showing up with a dirty coffee cup, those sorts of things. If you need help, see someone in a teal vest, ask if you need help, direction for any of these sort of spots as well. We're certainly there to help you. Hopefully someone took the option for taking public transport. I know the weather in the last day or two has probably thrown a little bit of havoc with the timetables. Darren's organised the electric bus that's been able to shuttle people back and forth from the train station as well. Hopefully people have embraced carpooling as well, that we push through the Hoover app and some of the pre-event communications as well. One of the big things that we've done this year is in terms of the packaging. So last year we saw some compostable cups. I had to check myself. They're not combustible. Well, I haven't checked, but hopefully you're not checking that. Hopefully you're putting them in the compostable bin. So we've got blue bins set up. So those are for the cups that you get here at the conference, the ones that are compostable. If you've brought in a cup from another coffee shop somewhere else, we'll have to check that before you try and pop it in a bin. So the lunch packs, so Bree here at Polybaker Cafe, who's doing our catering, has really embraced sustainability and sought to get the best option as well. So she sought to get industrial compostable packaging as well. So we've arranged with Gippsland Regional Organics that we'll be able to collect all those compostable items and we'll take it down there and they'll do a composting trial. So something that's really going to help us get a little bit of that circular economy aspect in the region as well by doing that, testing it out, see how well it goes, see what we need to learn in that sort of sense too. So some really good initiatives that have come around from this. Probably the other thing to mention before I jump off stage and we keep to time is the lanyards as well. We're really keen to reuse those lanyards at the next conference, whether that be next year or after that. Oh, Darren and I are missing ours, we can't display them. But certainly if you drop them off after your last day here, we can reuse them next year. We don't have to source new materials, we don't have to go and procure new items as well. So these are some of the things that we're working on. If you've got any questions about any of those, I'll be around. I'll probably be bin diving at some stage, just checking to make sure all the right things are in the bins. So yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully you can embrace all of those. If you've got any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you. Enjoy your conference.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. Thanks, Hoodie. Thanks very much. Ladies and gentlemen, just very quickly, this conference cannot go on without the help of our fantastic sponsors. We'd like to thank Latrobe City and our inaugural host, Wellington Shire, who have really stepped up as well. I'd like to thank our platinum partners, State Government. The Offshore Wind Industry Department of State Government has been a fantastic partner, have really helped us on the journey. We thank them. Iberdrola Australia has been responsible for the outdoor precinct and the environmental offsets that we've had. We thank Iberdrola for that. And AGL have been terrific in stepping up for the Youth Summit. Thank you. Our gold partners, Gippsland Dawn, previously known as Blue Float, are doing the networking drinks tonight. Because of them, we've got some cocktails, so don't miss tonight, okay? Corio Generation are doing the coffee stations. We thank them, and they've got their own cups which have gone through David's rigorous process. Thank you. Southerly 10 have really stepped up, or Star of the South, in the sustainability. So the electric buses has been part of their initiative. Thank you very much, Southerly 10. Gippsland Skies are looking at the Women in Renewables breakfast, and they're also sponsoring the Expo Hall. Thank them for that. And Ocean Winds are looking at these information screens, and they stepped up to the party there. Thank you all for our gold sponsors. To our silver, GCCN, Latrobe Valley Authority, Clean Energy Council, Glarwac, Food and Fibre, RDA, RDV, NGH Consulting, Orsted, ICN, Marinus Link, GHD, Carbon Net, Solar Victoria, Bank Australia, Alinta, the South Gippsland Council were terrific, VicGrid, TAFE Gippsland, Geranex, SEC and AusNet, and Energy Australia, and all of our Expo sponsors as well. We thank you very much for your contribution to the conference. One last thing is to mention Hero for Net Zero. We're doing a bit of work beating Howe. This year we're not having a leaderboard because that became ridiculous last year, but we have got secret squirrels out there, secret Howies, who are going to go up and hand you, if you're good, they're going to hand you a little Howie bag thing, okay, which you can redeem at the reception for a bottle of the greatest wine you'll ever take. Yes, indeed. Comes from Blue Gables in Gippsland. It's terrific. Not disparaging any other Gippsland winery. They're terrific as well. But Blue Gables, we love them, and Alistair's here, so we're going to say that. But you can get a book, one of Andy McCarthy's books. You can get a whole bunch of things. You just have to do something where you are a hero for net zero. That is, go to the Expo Hall and ask questions. Put your rubbish in the right bin. talk to others, use an electric bus. I don't know. Somebody will come up and hand you something that will mean that you will go home with something huge from the conference. To everyone, thank you very much for being here. We really appreciate that. We are now going to move into a break, and after the break we go to room 1 and 2 and the little theatre as well as here. Can you please spread yourself around, because I'd be awfully embarrassed if somebody had no one to talk to, okay? Thank you very much for your patience for the first session. We're sort of on time. We'll see you at 11 o'clock. Hello. Welcome. Hopefully you're caffeinated and we're ready to rock and roll. You've heard the initial speeches. You've got a bit of a flavour. You got excited. Now's our chance to land that excitement with a sequence of talkers. Now, understand that we're not only going to be running in here, but we've also got 2 of the other venues running at the same time. Please feel free to move around. And we won't be doing necessarily questions in some of these sessions, right, because we've kind of ran out of time. But hopefully during the lunch break, you'll also get a chance to wander over to the expo hall if you haven't done already and see what's going on over there. It's only just started, but it seems so exciting already. So thank you very much for getting involved. Ladies and gentlemen, you didn't come here to hear from me. No, you're here to find out about the significance of Gippsland to the energy transition. Yes, and can you make very welcome the Executive Director of Offshore Wind Energy Victoria, May.
Thanks, Darren. That's an unbelievable introduction. This is not as big a crowd as I got last year, but that's okay. I know there's other things going on. It's so good to see you all here today, and it's great to be back at GNEC. This is the conference of the year for Offshore Wind Energy Victoria, and I'm so pleased to be able to return. Today I wanted to talk to you about our offshore wind program and where it fits into the overall shift to renewable energy, and then update you on a few things we've got planned for the rest of the year. And I know that the Minister highlighted some of them before in her speech this morning. So I will, cognizant of time, I'm going to just emphasise a few of my slides and just skip through some of them. Before I started, I wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on, and I wanted to also thank the Gunai, Kurnai and Glawak last night for a fantastic event where they launched their Pathways to Partnership document. We've been working with Glawak for some time, and I really think that the partnerships that we have strived so hard to achieve between governments and Glawak are making great strides, and I encourage industry to work with Glawak in every aspect possible to make the offshore wind dream and the Gunai-Kurnai dream possible. So you're probably all very familiar with this map. This is a map of the 12 projects that have gained feasibility licences under the Commonwealth licensing framework. You can see here in the map that we've got projects in every part of the declared area. So we call that big part right near the shore the leg of lamb. It's just easier to describe it that way. And there's 6 projects there. We call this one the right angle triangle. It's not a perfect right angle, but it's easy to refer to it that way. And then we call this one here near Wilson's Prom the pizza slice. And when we refer to these areas, they all represent those projects estimated by the projects up to 25 gig of potential capacity, which is huge, massive. And we already know that offshore wind capacity is higher than onshore wind capacity. So we just are so excited to see these projects launch into their feasibility processes. Since I saw you last, and quite recently, the Victorian Government has launched its, we're calling it the Cheaper, Cleaner, Renewable, our plan for Victoria's energy future. And there are 4 pillars in this VEF, what's energy without a 3-letter acronym, and offshore wind forms a critical part of Pillar 1, enabling the renewables big build. I'll repeat our targets again, which are now legislated and enshrined: 2 gigawatts by 2032, 4 by 2035 and 9 by 2040. The 9 by 2040 sounds really far away, but it's not. It's really not. And we know how long it takes to develop offshore wind projects. So the 2 gigawatts by 2032, it's a crucial first step to allow us to hit 4 by 2035 and 9 by 2040. We've just got some indicative numbers here of the kind of assets and infrastructure that will go into our electricity future. And our estimate is about over 200 offshore wind turbines will be required as part of our program. This is the slide that I really wanted to focus on today. We get asked quite often, why is Victoria doing offshore wind? What is the rationale for it? A lot of people like to remind us of the levelised cost of energy of offshore wind, and we're very aware of it. But we continually remind people that offshore wind is unique for Victoria. The state has key strategic advantages and values from offshore wind energy, and Gippsland is a major strength in that strategic advantage. We know we have world-class offshore wind resources. They're comparable, if not better, than what we've seen in the North Sea, which has a target of 50 gigawatts by 2030 for offshore wind. Our seabed is shallow, and we can use fixed foundations. We also know that the Gippsland and Southern Ocean declared areas are serendipitously located near our 500 kV backbone. And that is not a thing that is common, that we can easily extend our shared transmission network and connect offshore wind to our grid. We know that offshore wind provides Victoria and the national electricity market, the NEM, with the ability to diversify our renewable energy supply. And that will be really important as we start to see a new generation mix as we transition out of coal. We know the scale and capacity factors of offshore wind are incredibly attractive as we are working to put in new renewable energy at scale and at quickly. If Victoria's plans are executed well, we could do 1 gig a year, which is a significant sort of build-out rate that we're aiming for to support the national transition to renewable energy. And we also know that the capacity that comes out of offshore wind is much larger than onshore. The capacity factors range from 45 to about 50%, compared to onshore of around 30 to 38%. The biggest thing I think that we are conscious of and that we now sort of experience at this conference is the unique and rich history that the Gippsland community and the Latrobe Valley have in energy production. Here we have a community that understands the importance of energy and the role that they've played in energy supply for decades and decades. We find an understanding here of the importance of energy supply to our economy, to our way of life, to our quality of life, and the recent storm events and wind events of the past couple of days have emphasised how critical electricity is to our everyday lives. So there's an openness here to supporting renewable energy and to be open to offshore wind that we don't see in other areas. And I think that's just a huge asset. We expect offshore wind jobs to peak in the mid-2030s on our path to 9 gigawatts. From 2035 onwards, we estimate 1,500 to 1,700 ongoing jobs are expected over 30 years. We need to start building and planning for this workforce because it's not going to crop up overnight. But we see that throughout the phases of offshore wind delivery, development and project management, construction and manufacturing of infrastructure, and operations and maintenance, there will be different categories of skills and capabilities that the state and the regional economy will need to supply. And we need to prepare for that. We see Gippsland's skilled energy workforce to be in a great position to capitalise on this opportunity. and to transition to offshore wind with crossover skills that are critical to all phases of the delivery of our offshore wind targets. What we have here is highly industrialised work settings that are not unfamiliar to our workforce already and to our communities. We see that there will be similar skills and qualifications between industries, and that training and education pathways can be created and leveraged to really build our workforce to prepare. This is just a little bit about why OWEV was established and what work streams that we've been concentrating on as we seek to support the development of this new sector. What I might highlight today, and I think you've heard about it quite a bit this morning, is that we really want to encourage traditional owner partnerships, and that is something new and unique that the Victorian State Government has been really seeking to drive as we establish this new sector, because we recognise the new opportunity that this presents to the local First Peoples. And we have a unique challenge, but also opportunity in relation to enabling infrastructure. And you'll hear from Alistair Parker from VicGrid later today, but really driving in that transmission. I know the Minister joked this morning that it might not have been the most riveting part of her speech, but I find it riveting because people need to connect to the grid, and for the investments to be successful and for people to find confidence in our process, they need to know there'll be transmission ready there to meet them as they build the generation. So between the transmission and the ports, we're also working really closely with our partners across government and industry to make sure we have the transmission and port ready there for offshore wind development. At the end of last year, we released our Implementation Statement 3, and this highlights some of the topics that it covered. As the Minister mentioned this morning, we'll be looking to release Implementation 4 before the end of this year, and that really will update the sector and stakeholders and community on what our next steps will be and provide some more clarity around areas such as our support package, auction process, enabling infrastructure and engagement with the community. Finally, I just wanted to highlight some great work that's been done by our partnerships team in OWEV. We had heard through our engagement with community that there was some concern about how the ocean would look with offshore wind turbines in it. And so we wanted to support the understanding of the visual impact of potential offshore wind to the Gippsland coast. So 3 popular locations were chosen to develop visualisations using technical specifications from the NREL lab in America. These locations were Golden Beach, Woodside Beach and Wilson's Prom from the top of the Mount Oberon summit, which we know is a very popular visitor spot. And if you go to our energy website, on the DEECA website, you can actually see these from different distances. So there's 10 Ks out, 30 Ks out and 60 Ks out. And you can also pan around to look at the visualisations from different sort of perspectives. And I think it's a really useful resource that you can also direct community to if they wanted to sort of see an example of offshore wind off their local coast. For us, it's done a lot to improve understanding and potentially address any misunderstandings of what offshore wind turbines could look like. They don't, can I caveat, they don't represent an actual wind farm, but they're a really good kind of approximation and visualisation of what it could look like, and we think that's really useful for community understanding. Finally, I've sped through this, but I just wanted to recognise our stakeholders and the parties we've worked with over the last 18 months to develop our insights and connections with the Gippsland community. It's been a pleasure working with the local organisations and councils to progress offshore wind in the area, and we know there's a lot more work to do, but I just wanted to recognise these groups. So if there were any questions that you had, or inquiries, or community members are interested in learning more about offshore wind, please feel free to share our details with them. We have an offshore wind inbox, and we regularly receive requests for information or clarification from the community. And we're very, very pleased to be able to engage with everyone who's interested in offshore wind. Thank you.
Are you happy to take questions?
Yeah.
Okay. I might... oh, no, that was a bit of a hard one. Do we do this? This is a question you probably can't answer. Now that I've said that, okay. Now this one. What are the plans for bolstering the transmission network for the significant increase in generation from offshore wind? It's probably not your department, is it?
Well, I can answer it to a degree, but I think Alistair will answer it much more in a more detailed way later today. So there is already a project in development that will expand the transmission network from the Latrobe Valley out to, I think, around Gifford, Seaspray. But there's a corridor that's been identified for consulting on and engagement with the community, and that project is being developed so it can basically go into environmental and planning process and constructability to be able to be completed 2 years ahead of our generation so that the generation can connect on and energise. So that's all in train and being planned for by VicGrid.
That's great. One more. I'm sorry. I've thrown this at you and I didn't even prepare you. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The visualisations that I talked about, somebody's asked about the size capacity of the turbines used in the visualisations, noting the 15 megawatt ones are the ones typical to be proposed, are much larger than historically used 3.6 megawatt machines. Do you have any idea about the visualisations that they're looking at?
Yeah, so they're 15, Giselle, they're 15 megawatts, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, the visualisations. And so the 15 megawatts was picked because we expect, and we're certainly specifying a port to be able to handle up to 18, I think, around 18, but we expect by the time our offshore wind is constructed and developed, the turbines will be at least 15 megawatts for efficiency and kind of scalability. And also, you know, the bigger your turbines, I think, the less of them you need, so less impact in some ways on the environment. But, you know, there are some people who, you know, might expect 20 or 25, but what we're seeing is the OEMs who produce these turbines have really, for their own commercial needs, slowed down the development of increasingly growing the turbines to be able to get commercial returns from their R&D investments. So we think 15 megawatts is about the right size.
Yeah, and good answer. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to throw that at you.
No,
thank you very
my
much.
pleasure.
No, thank you very much. Thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, please, May.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the questions. We will, if we have time, we'll try to answer them, but as you can see, we're running a little bit late. Thank you very much for being in here promptly and getting ourselves together. We're going to move on to our next speaker, who we're very pleased to have here today. So what we're doing, I'm just trying to get the name. Oh, here we go. Accelerating Victoria's Energy Transition is the title of our next talk. And I'd like to welcome to the stage the Chief Executive Officer of the SEC. Please make welcome Chris Miller.
Good morning, everyone. Really, really delighted to be here. The resemblance with Bon Scott, I'm sure, is uncanny for all of you looking up at the lectern. No, truly, this is a real delight to be here. I say this next comment hoping that there aren't any other organisers of energy conferences in the room. I go to a lot of energy conferences, it won't surprise you to learn, and this is the funnest of them and actually the most rewarding of them. And that's not just because the speakers get to choose classic Australian rock and roll songs as their introduction music, but I think it's because this conference, unlike others, really does facilitate community voice, a diversity of community views, and it's really clear and palpable, even just standing up here, that community are driving the program and driving the conversations that happen at this conference. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I would like to commence my remarks by formally acknowledging the peoples of the Gunai-Kurnai, the sovereign peoples of the Gunai-Kurnai, as the traditional owners and custodians of these lands and nearby waterways. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, Also recognise and acknowledge any elders of other First Peoples communities that might be here with us today. And I listened with interest to the conversation that happened earlier this morning about partnership and the great work that Gunai Kurnai has done in partnership with industry in articulating what good partnership looks like. I'll talk a little bit about partnership and SEC's ambitions to be great partners with a variety of actors, First Nations peoples, industry, training providers, etc. But First Nations peoples, I think, have so much to teach us about what good partnership looks like. It's about respect, it's about listening, and it's about time, investing the time in developing real and meaningful partnerships. These things do not happen overnight. It's particularly special for me being here today representing the SEC. I am regularly reminded, wherever I go, of the SEC's deep history and its deep connection to Gippsland and the Latrobe Valley. We actually have a larger SEC contingent with us here this year. I had a couple of people last year, but we've got half a dozen or so here. We've got a stall at the expo space, and I'd really invite you to go and make yourselves known to the SEC crew and learn about what it is that we're doing. But in short, a lot's happened since I was here last year. We have launched a strategy that's publicly available, and we've established the SEC as a new publicly owned renewable energy company. We have welcomed an independent board of directors, and we're now hard at work delivering the plan that I've talked about, including making our first equity investment in one of the world's biggest batteries. And we've got further investments progressing pretty quickly through the pipeline as I talk. Our strategic focus areas really are built around accelerating the transition, but doing so in a way which ensures that we are helping deliver reliable, affordable, renewable energy to all Victorians. And we will be organising our effort around three main activity pillars, which I'll elaborate on in a minute. But before I do, just wanted to play a video that will set the scene a little bit for the detail that follows.
The SEC is back to deliver renewable, more affordable, reliable energy. We're investing in wind, solar, and storage, and supporting Victorian homes to switch to electric, helping reduce energy bills, drive down emissions, and create jobs. It's renewable energy, powering Victoria for Victorians. Authorised by the Victorian Government, Melbourne.
I could probably stop there. I mean, that really does give you the very simple snapshot of what we're trying to do, but I won't. Three pillars. So our first pillar, or area of focus, is investing to accelerate the transition. We've been allocated seed capital of $1 billion, so it's an initial $1 billion that we will invest towards delivering in time 4.5 gigawatts of new renewable generation and storage. That's approximately enough power to power around 1.5 million homes, and it's in renewable terms the replacement capacity of Loy Yang A. We've made a good start in investing that capital. We announced late last year a nearly $250 million investment by the SEC in the Melbourne Renewable Energy Hub, which is a large 600 megawatt battery located out near Calder Park off the Calder Freeway, which we're developing in partnership with another Australian renewable energy investor, Equus Australia. And through our investment, we are giving Victorians a direct stake in one of the world's biggest batteries. As I've said, work is progressing really well. We're well and truly into the construction phase of that project. And when that battery comes online late next year, it will deliver around about 1.6 gigawatt hours of storage. That's enough to power around about 200,000 homes during the evening peak. Our second focus is helping households to go all electric. And there's been some conversation about this already today. We know households are struggling with high energy bills for a whole range of reasons. The costs are particularly acute for households that are relying heavily on gas. So by supporting households to go electric and make the switch to renewable sources as well, we can help Victorians reduce their bills and in doing so reduce their emissions. And if we can help households make their own changes, we're also helping Victoria to achieve its renewable energy targets in the process. All of this, of course, requires that there be a skilled workforce in place with the right skills in the right places at the right time. I just wanted to put the SEC's role as an investor in the context of the overall investment task that's ahead for Australia, but also for Victoria. According to AEMO in their latest reports, to reach Australia's 2030 targets, we need to see about 6 gigawatts of new large-scale generation come online every year. We have been tracking over the last few years considerably lower than that, at around about 3 or 4 gigawatts per annum. To put a different stat in front of you, 9 renewable projects were commissioned in Australia in 2023, compared with 41 projects in 2021. So you can see there has been a bit of a slowdown. We have seen a bounce back this year, lots of green shoots across both generation and large-scale storage, but we need to lift the effort and lift the pace. This graphic in front of you shows the story in Victoria. And what it's essentially showing is the trajectory in orange that we would need to follow in terms of deployment of large-scale generation and storage to hit Victoria's 2035 95% targets. The blue dotted line plots the current trajectory based on plants which have reached financial close or moved into commissioning over the last 4 or 5 years. So the blue line is where we're heading to at the moment, but we need to be orange. And you'll see through the presentation that one of the SEC's primary contributions, I hope, is that we can increase the steepness of that curve and bridge that gap between where we're going and where we need to be. Just to give us a sense of the size of the effort, forecasts would suggest that Victoria needs to add around about 27 million solar panels to homes and around about 900 onshore turbines by 2035. And to ensure that we get that rate of deployment, we need private investors to continue investing with confidence all over the state. And this is where I think the SEC can make a difference. As a publicly owned renewable energy company with objectives beyond financial returns, we do aim to make sustainable returns, we can be a really important bridge between public actors and private actors. We will partner with industry to provide confidence, but amplify and accelerate investment. How does that work? Well, what we'll do is invest predominantly with private sector partners, not always. Sometimes we'll invest on our own account fully, but we'll aim to invest before market signals are strong enough to incentivise others acting alone or acting at the scale that is required. And we'll aim to invest where the SEC can bring something, where our participation can bring something new or additional. For example, speeding things up, making a project bigger, or addressing critical system gaps. And we'll prioritise investments that in turn unlock investment opportunities for others, even if those investments occur without us. The best way to illustrate our investment approach is by talking about the investment that I've referenced, the investment in the Melbourne Renewable Energy Hub. So it's about $250 million, I said, of equity investment. And that investment played a really critical role in ensuring the project's delivery, in securing its delivery. It enabled the SEC with its project partners to move the project into construction very quickly, but also supported one of the battery components to increase in depth. So one of the battery components, one of the 200 megawatt components, there are 3, has, as a result of our investment, and because we asked for it, increased its depth from 2 hours to 4 hours. I've talked about how our investments can leverage others and support and unlock developments by others. The project that I've talked about is more or less where you can see Sydenham on that map, and you'll note that that's really at a critical junction point between various transmission routes. It's about halfway between the Latrobe Valley and Portland, and really sits at the apex of Victoria's transmission network. So when it comes online next year, it will, we know, unlock development across 3 renewable zones, the Southwest, Western Victoria and Murray, by providing that ability to soak up capacity and strengthen grid. in that western part of Victoria. It's also, when it comes online, going to provide much needed storage for our grid generally, soaking up surplus energy from rooftop solar during the day and making sure that energy is available when we need it at peak periods. But perhaps most importantly, as we think about our investments give Victorians a stake in critical energy infrastructure through the lens of public ownership. And through public ownership, our investments need to do more than everything I've talked about. They need to ensure that we deliver benefits. We deliver benefits locally, we deliver jobs, and we develop local supply chains, but also deliver returns that can be reinvested and reinvested in Victoria and Victorian renewables. Just to give you a really basic example of this, the hub that I've talked about will create around about 14 apprentice and trainee roles. And already about 7 apprentices and interns have been working at the hub and gained hands-on experience, including a gentleman, Su Yong-o, who you can see pictured. He's an engineering student who's been working as a project control assistant at the facility. What's particularly exciting about his story is that he hadn't considered working in renewables until the opportunity to work on this project, and now he's keen to make this a career. But we're not just about investing in large-scale assets at the SEC. I firmly believe that consumers are at the heart of this transition. They need to be at the heart of this transition, and in fact have been the heroes of the transition to date. The transition is well underway. So across Australia, about 40% of our electricity is supplied from renewable energy sources. A lot of that is due to the high penetration of rooftop solar at the home level. So our penetration there is not just the envy of the world, but it's allowed households to see direct benefits of the transition. And I think there's a huge opportunity to keep households at the centre of the transition and realising more benefits through home electrification. So here in Victoria, the opportunity is particularly big. Because of our heavy reliance on natural gas, it means that we get a bigger bang for buck switching homes from gas to electric. People would probably know we have a very high percentage of residential gas use in Victoria. It's around about 80%, higher than any other state. And that's across heating, hot water, and cooking. So huge amounts of gas being used. It's a product of the messages last century that gas is cheap and efficient, and it was actively encouraged. Tony Wood talked about that in his presentation. But we know that Victorians want a renewable future and have shown a really strong appetite for switching. But we know there are hurdles, and one of the hurdles we know about is that Victorians just don't know where to go for trusted information on how to switch, what technologies and services are available. We aim to be a trusted voice to help consumers navigate that process. Part of that, I think, is broad-based education campaigns, awareness campaigns, drawing from successful campaigns like Slip Slop Slap and Life Be In It. So there's more work for government to do, for industry to do, for community to do in that space. We've launched a campaign which goes to some of that. But I did want to spend a bit of time just talking about, some of the specific tools that we're offering to consumers. We're in market at the moment piloting a new digital planner that helps households take the guesswork out of electric. It's really the first step in the SEC of building a one-stop shop, best-in-class one-stop shop to help households save on their energy bills. And essentially the tool works by taking users through a very short survey about their home, their energy usage, their appliance mix, and creates a customised plan to help those households switch to electric. And it really puts Victorian households at the heart of the process, which I think is critical. I'll just share a couple of insights and then draw this presentation to a close. We're using this piloting process to adapt the tool, to learn what customers actually want, not what we think customers want, and have yielded quite a few interesting insights. The first of which is that we've discovered many trades continue to recommend replacing gas with gas, like for like. Households are very keen to know whether they're going to get a payback within the lifetime of their tenancy or occupation of their home. They're also wondering about some of the other costs, including the need to potentially upgrade electrical circuits and wiring at home. As I said, what we're really trying to do is listen to customers and apply a very consumer-focused approach. I won't spend a lot of time talking about workforce other than to say it stitches together the other two pillars, and at its centre for us is developing an SEC Centre of Training Excellence, which will really try and be a bridge and a gap filler in the workforce space. Lots of work engaging with students, ensuring that there are great pathways for apprentices and early career workers into job placements, but also ensuring that industry is supported with the top-up skills and training that it needs. And that work is progressing in earnest at the moment. Look, just in conclusion, it's been a ride since government announced the re-establishment of the SEC. It's been a great ride. Progress is continuing. It's been really humbling, very exciting to be part of an organisation with such an iconic history, which I do not take very lightly, and a very significant mandate. I think what I'd say is this region knows better than any what it's going to take to deliver the transition, the opportunities and the challenges. And it's clear that across Victoria, the community in Gippsland is actually already a leading voice in the transition and for the transition. So our ambition at the SEC is to work with community right across Victoria, in Gippsland, to learn from you and to bring the SEC to life again in a really meaningful way for you. Thank you.
Good on you, thank you. All right, thank you. We might move on, but thank you anyway, mate. Good on you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll move on, if you don't mind. We're going to get to our next speaker, Making Connections. Can you please welcome to the stage a person who's been with us through our entire journey, from the beginning now through to our third conference, the CEO of VicGrid, Mr. Alistair Parker. Good on you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everybody, and thank you, Darren. Never follow the SEC, the most popular brand in the energy sector. For those who don't know me, I'm Alistair Parker, Chief Executive of VicGrid. As Darren said, this is my third of these conferences, and it's a really, forgive the accidental pun, energising event of really connecting with people. So I'm just going to talk very briefly, I'll try not to get carried away, about VicGrid, introduce us very briefly, talk about the 2 gigawatts transmission project that we are working on, then give a bit of context on what's called the Victorian Transmission Plan and the Victorian Transmission Infrastructure Framework. Apologies. There'll be plenty of acronyms in this presentation. And then I'll give you a bit of a flavour on what we've heard from people in Gippsland through some of our consultation around those plans. So first of all, the 3 Ps. We're involved in helping government develop policy around electricity transmission. We advise on more and more on planning of transmission in Victoria. We'll formally take up our full responsibilities 1 July next year. But in the meantime, there's a number of things, and that's subject to legislation and cabinet decision. But in the meantime, there's a lot of things we're doing around transmission planning. And then finally, we provide oversight on a number of large projects for the Victorian government and make sure that the transition is, as far as possible, happening at a pace consistent with our needs. So I won't labour this slide, simply to observe there are a number of government targets have been set for the transition, including for the delivery of offshore wind. And so we very much, as VicGrid, work within these targets to make sure that there will be the right amount of transmission to enable these targets in a timely manner, but that we don't build more than we need, that we really think about how we build the minimum amount of transmission possible. At the moment in Gippsland, we're very focused on that 2 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2032 and what we need to do as an organisation to enable that, but I will talk about those longer term targets a bit as we get there. So the Minister spoke this morning about the study area for that 2 gigawatts of transmission back to the Latrobe Valley. I got a bit of feedback that we'd shared far too much detail with the Minister, but you can see here on the map the hatched area being an area where cables from the offshore wind would come ashore, Gifford as an area where we're looking for a connection hub, and then a route heading back to the Latrobe Valley through Stradbroke West and so on. You can also see on this map the Basslink interconnector, and the Minister alluded to the possibility of perhaps sharing some territory with that existing infrastructure, and that was feedback we had. We think, and the Minister mentioned this, but we think here are some of the advantages of the study area that we've chosen. One, cost. It also reduces engineering complexity. More importantly, it avoids residential area. It also allowed us to follow existing infrastructure, as I said, used less agricultural land, or went across less agricultural land than some of the other options that we looked at, and it allows a bit of flexibility over the future, and so on. So we published how we made all those decisions. We tried to be really open about that and not overwhelm people with detail, but at the same time really share everything that we had taken into account in our decision making, and that's on the VicGrid website if people want to examine that and understand what we're saying. So the next steps for this, and I have to apologise, I'm quite short-sighted, so I can't read the screen there. That's why I have to keep looking over my shoulder. I want to make sure I get it right. So we will carry on engaging with the community. We're really happy to come out and talk to people, answer any questions they might have, try and share any information that we have, but probably more importantly, just understand their particular circumstances, understand what concerns they have for their land, understand if there are places that would be more suitable or less suitable for them, and so on, and just really make sure we have a good understanding of what's really on people's mind about existing land use. We will be carrying out heritage and ecological surveys as we go, and that will allow us to narrow the study area down to what we call a corridor, and then eventually, and we'll take more time to do this right, to a route. So there will be a lot of time for people to engage with us and give us their perspectives. And we have started some on-the-ground planning and environmental assessments, because obviously we'll have to go through a full environmental approvals process, and that's something we'll want to do a really good job on and a really proper job on. So that was all the update I was going to provide in terms of the initial transmission corridor study area in Gippsland. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Victorian Transmission Plan and the work we're doing there. And I know it's caused a little bit of confusion in the Gippsland area because we were already talking about one corridor. So I just want to give everybody here a bit more of a flavour of that. So the transmission plan, the Victorian Transmission Plan, is an entirely new way of trying to undertake transmission planning. We're really at the very early stages of that, but the key components are, one, that you don't start from a kind of electrical view of the world, but rather you start from a view of what the existing land use is. And so we are looking at lots of data sets, lots of maps of Victoria to try and understand what the existing land uses are, where there's areas with particular environmental value, high value environmental areas, high value agricultural areas, etc., etc. It brings forward a community benefits regime that we've consulted on just working through the feedback on that at the minute. It, importantly, and I won't get too bogged down in this, but reforms the way that power stations and generators will get connection to the grid and get access to the grid, and that will be really important to give people the assurance to make investment decisions. And we will also reform the way that we procure transmission from transmission providers. So in Victoria we have competition. In other states they have a monopoly provider, but in Victoria we have competition. And so we're making sure that as we go out to the market and get people to build, own and operate this infrastructure, that they're the right sort of operators, that they have a community minded approach to what they're doing, and they have the capability to actually build this stuff properly. And throughout, and the line along the bottom of the graph, I'm glad the chairs aren't there, you can read it, the line across is just really the way we're trying to drive this as much as possible is early engagement, early conversations. I'm certainly driving us to be as transparent as we possibly can be, and just get out and talk to people and understand what they need. So it's quite a lengthy process, and we're still at the very early stages. We will shortly publish Victorian Transmission Plan draft guidelines. We've been going through a consultation. We've had a ton of feedback about that, and we'll shortly publish how we're responding to that feedback and what we're doing about it. The next phase will be, in public sense, we will then be working through all the information we have, all the geographic information we have and so on. And early in 2025, we will publish the Victorian Transmission Plan, and that will lay out some prospective needs to make this transition to renewable energy. And then, again, a period of consultation, get feedback from people, understand community sentiment, understand developer sentiment, and then we'll publish the final version of that in July 25. It's only then that we will move into a period of developing renewable energy zones formally, and these will be the areas where there are economic, social, environmental, land use benefits from sort of concentrating renewable energy in particular zones, and that allows us to minimise the amount of infrastructure that we need in one particular place. So post-July. 1 minute. Gosh, it flies when you're up here with a warm audience. I feel terrible. I feel like I've waffled now. So anyway, there'll be a long, long process to get to the RES declaration. I will skip through that. I will talk to the map. This was a map that we published with the VTP. It has huge areas, these hexagons, which say this might be a priority area for renewable energy zones. But of course, they're at too high a level to really reflect the rich seam of knowledge and data that people are providing us. And so when we go through the next phase, you will see us much more start to shrink in where we think are the areas that are suitable for renewable energy zones, and at much more detail. And for example, we might completely remove some of these hexagons from the map, or we might shape and sculpt the areas under them. But we've been, in a really good way, drowned with information that people are telling us this isn't a great area and this is a better area for this type of infrastructure. And feedback is still open on that. And then finally, we've done a lot of engagement in Gippsland. It's actually the second most responsive area. We've had more people turn out to our events. We've had more people giving us feedback through paper and electronic means. I have to mention, even though I'm short of time, we've heard the concerns around the habitat of the giant earthworm, and plenty of discussion around the prominence and importance of Wilson's Prom, which we've really heard clearly, and some feedback around impact and name repayments. Unsurprisingly, these are the key messages that we've heard from the Gippsland community: concerns around bushfires, real importance of biodiversity, natural environment, agricultural and land use, but a real sense of the economic opportunity for Gippsland and also the need to get the impact and benefits correct. So with that, we are engaging with industry, of course, and happy to do so. And I'd like to thank you for your time. I'm sorry if I waffled, but delighted to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Alistair. Thanks, mate. Thank you so much. Thank you. No, that's terrific, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I've got a special guest. Hey, as you've wandered in here, you get a special guest. Ladies and gentlemen, can I please welcome to the microphone the federal member for Gippsland, the Honourable Darren Chester. There you go.
Well, thank you, Darren. I doubt I've ever had an introduction quite as spectacular as that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've only got 2 words I want to discuss with you today. The first one is thank you, and the second one is respect. Thank you for coming to Gippsland, those of you who are visitors to our region. Thank you to Latrobe City and Wellington Shire for being such active partners in the transition which is underway in our community. What you see around you is an example of what happens when local, state and federal governments work together to deliver something which is good for our community. This centre was delivered through the hard work of Latrobe City, state government and federal government of different political persuasions, but working together for the betterment of the community. So thank you for taking the time to be here, and thank you for your support for our region and your investment in our region. The other word I mentioned was respect. It's so important that we respect the local community as we undertake the transition which is underway here. Our region has had an incredible history, 100 years as being an energy powerhouse. This community has what I'd call a high degree of energy literacy. They understand that it needs to be affordable, it needs to be reliable, and we need to do our share in terms of environmental emissions and be part of the global solutions. I just urge you to continue to show the respect you've already been showing to our community with consultation with landowners, talking to businesses, finding opportunities for them to be part of the solution for the future. When some of my colleagues in Canberra talk about offshore wind and renewable energies solutions, a lot of their anger is directed to the fact that their communities haven't been shown the respect you've been showing my community. So I encourage you to keep up the great work, continue to consult with the council but also with the local landowners, and continue to work in a way which recognises our heritage as a powerhouse for energy generation, but also our future as a supplier for this great state we live in and the great nation we live in. So thank you again. Congratulations on being here. I hope you enjoy your time in Latrobe Valley. I can recommend any of the pubs in town for the chicken parmesanas, but make sure you spend as much as you can in a local business while you're here. Thank you very much.
Good on you, Darren. Well done. Calm the swans. Thank you, Darren. Thank you very much for those words. We do appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another friend of the conference coming up very much next. Solar Victoria have been with us from the get-go, and we appreciate their support. And we now welcome the CEO of Solar Victoria. Please make welcome Mr. Stan Krpan. Thank you. Thanks, mate.
Well, good afternoon and thanks, Darren, and congratulations to Darren and the Gippsland Climate Change Network on putting yet another fantastic conference, and great to be here with you for the first time in Traralgon. I do want to acknowledge that the Gunai-Kurnai are the traditional owners of the land upon which we're gathered today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. One of the absolute privileges of my role and the roles that I've performed in the sustainability movement over the time has been that I get to engage with fantastic leaders, not only in rooms like this, but also one of my absolute favourites of all time was an author called Paul Hawken. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Paul. Paul's visited Australia on a number of occasions. And if you're not familiar with his works, Drawdown, which is 100 practical ideas to tackle climate change, blessed unrest, and also natural capitalism, I'm sure you're familiar with some of the concepts because people use them all the time. And he has a great quote from the Drawdown book released just a few years ago that says, "We see global warming not as the inevitability, but as an invitation to build, innovate and affect change, a pathway that awakens creativity, compassion and genius. It's not a liberal agenda, it's not a conservative agenda, it's the human agenda." And so what I wanted to do today, we focus a lot on the engineering and the solutions, and that's important to give us that sense of hope that we do have those solutions, and certainly they've been well spoken and written about. Today I wanted to focus on the human agenda and talk about the people. Our program, which has been around since 2018, has now reached more than 330,000 Victorians. It's allowed us to gather some really deep and rich insights. So what I wanted to do today was three things. Firstly, to give you a bit of an overview of solar homes and the work of Solar Victoria and my colleagues and what's been achieved to date. Secondly, some insights from our customers, from those 300 or so thousand people that we know quite intimately from our data and insights, and why it's important that we engage people in the transition. And then the third is how we've adapted the program over time and really leverage some of those insights to change the program, but also to influence a change agenda that's much broader than kilowatts, megawatts, or indeed gigawatts. I mentioned that we were established in 2018. Our purpose is to empower Victorians to access clean and affordable energy. And we've got 5 priorities. We sit within the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, one of the largest government departments in the state. Firstly, to boost access to affordable and clean and renewable energy, so making it accessible to all Victorians. Accelerating the energy transition, supporting industry growth and innovation, raising industry safety and quality, and investing in research, insights and knowledge sharing, which is part of what I'll do today. Over the years, we've reached 283,000 Victorians who have now installed solar, about 17,000 batteries. We've also supported people with electric vehicle subsidies, with heat pump hot water systems, and more than 27,000 installed over the last couple of years, all up more than 330,000, as I say. That's 2 gigawatts of generation, so effectively bigger in generating capacity than your lawn and just under Loy Yang. So a really significant contribution to not just those individual households who benefit from the financial incentive and from the ongoing bill savings that they have, their contribution to the environment and having some agency around climate change, but also the fact that they are now a really huge and important part of the generation mix in Victoria. It's about 25% of all renewable energy capacity that's been installed in the state since we were created in 2018, certainly much more than we had anticipated. And the last 12 months have been a record, with almost 80,000 Victorian households supported around through that range of different products and services that we provide. In terms of the contribution to the Victorian renewable energy targets, which are amongst the most ambitious in the state, the program is expected to generate 13% of Victoria's 40% renewable energy target by 2025, which we're well on our way to achieve, and 15% of the 65% target in 2030. And our offers have been pretty consistent over the last couple of years, and they remain. So in terms of the flagship of the program being the Solar Homes program, a $1,400 rebate for solar PV installations, matched with a $1,400 interest-free loan for 4 years for those people who take that up, and about 2/3 of our customers take that up. Still $1,000 for either solar hot water or increasingly hot water heat pumps. Battery loans, also interest-free for 4 years, of $8,800, which in some cases means that there's zero up front on a battery, particularly on some of the smaller ones. On a larger one, you're making a co-contribution, but you're avoiding interest at about 6%, so quite an important incentive there. We've also recently expanded the program to solar for apartments, which I'll come back to, and we still actively engage with the community housing sector, where more than 1,000 low-income rental units have been upgraded as a result of the program. All up, more than $600 million invested in the Victorian community through the programs to date. And collectively, our solar customers and battery customers in particular, saving almost $300 million collectively per annum each and every year. Victorian sentiment is changing. So while we've been rolling out our program, if you look at the last 10 years, and I'm using Sustainability Victoria data here from 2023, we've gone from about 1 in 50 people saying that they have a concern about climate change to now 1 in 10. And indeed, a good deal of those say it's their most important consideration. And there's a direct link between the increase in the concerns that people have around climate change and its immediate impact, particularly local weather events. And I don't need to say that in Gippsland, because in regional Victoria in particular, people feel the acute effects of climate change, but also that they link those weather events to climate change and also feel a sense of urgency and responsibility for doing something about it. there's a correlation in that growth in awareness around climate change with also the percentage of people that are taking up renewable energy. And about 41% of Victorians benefit from renewable energy, either because they have solar or a battery at home, or they invest in green power through their local energy retailer. And about a third of Victoria's freestanding homes now have solar. I'll bring that back to why that's important, because for me, there's a link between some of what I'll share in a moment. Victorians want government action in three key areas. Firstly, in more education and advice. And you've heard from Chris Miller earlier about the role that the SEC will play as the centre of excellence and providing that information and guidance and pathways to people to not only access renewable energy, but also to electrify their homes. 32% of people more urgently accelerating the transition to renewables, and 27% requiring support to implement energy efficiency in their homes. I'll talk about that, how that connects to the 300,000 customers that we've had, which gives us one of the richest data sets in the country now about how people engage, not only with the electricity and the energy in their home, energy efficiency, but also how they engage around some of these broader issues around climate change and their concerns around it. Knowledge and engagement increases as a result of people taking up solar in their homes, and increasingly as a result of the program, what we know is that these customers want to optimise their investments. So they're not only accessing solar, and I won't go through the statistics because you can follow those as I'm going through my presentation, but a good deal of these people are already benefiting from solar. They recognise that, but they also want to go further. And so they're interested in energy efficiency, they're interested in electrification of their home, they're looking at getting off gas increasingly, and they want to optimise their investment because they know that it's in their interest, but also that self-optimisation requires them to optimise the use of that energy in their own home. And increasingly, what we know from our customers is that it gives them some agency. In other words, that they have some power to implement something that has an effect on climate change, and that they recognise it, notwithstanding that the great majority of people who take up solar in their homes do it for cost-saving reasons. Rooftop solar is also increasingly the gateway to electrification. I talked about these customers being primed to go further. They're primed to electrify their homes, and some of the statistics there will give you the sense of how engaged they are. More than half of them looking to electrify their heating, which for most Victorians is the biggest use of energy in their homes, and then secondly, to electrify water heating. But also increasingly wanting to electrify their homes and get off gas altogether, so cooking and decommissioning that gas over time. And so we see it's an important opportunity to continue to engage this audience. So if you think not only about the 300 or so thousand Victorians who have benefited from solar homes, but the 700,000 homes that are now connected to solar, that they are primed, and that it's part of government's responsibility and our collective responsibility and opportunity to support them to electrify their homes, to make it easier, more attractive, more accessible, that we educate them on the benefits and the opportunities of that, and that we see that this is an important opportunity not only for government and for practitioners and those people who are working in this sector, but also for solar businesses. 1 in 2 of hot water systems that are being installed under our program are being installed by a solar retailer. So there's a person who is generally an electrician or somebody that's developed a business. You heard from Andy McCarthy earlier in the day. 1 in 2 of them are now installing something in addition to that solar, which is optimising that investment. And increasingly we see these businesses as being integrated businesses that are providing whole-of-home energy solutions that are electrified. In addition, obviously, to the solar and the battery and the electric vehicle and all those other things that are coming. I want to talk about social licence for a moment, and a lot will be said over the next 2 days about social licence. And in my view, we can think about solar homes, those people in Victoria who have solar on their homes, those 700,000, as an important social movement, not just one that is looking to optimise for their individual investment, but actually collectively that are a part of a social movement that is engaged in the future. And it takes me back to that Paul Hawken quote, that these people are not only investors in their own home and wanting to improve their own home, do their bit to save on their energy bills as well as do their bit for the environment, but they're also investors in our collective future. They're investors in the distribution grid, and we need to treat them that way. We need to treat them more importantly than we have today. We need to respect that they have a role that is critical to energy generation now and that will grow over time, and that is an important responsibility of ours to collectively optimise that investment, not for their own home, or not just for their own home, but also collectively. How do we optimise those assets? How do we coordinate those assets and control them in a way that benefit those customers, that unlock new value streams for those customers, but are also then playing a much more important role in the distribution grid? And that social licence is going to be critical, not just for transmission, not just for the large energy generators, but also more broadly for the more difficult things that we have to do in the years to come. And in my view, treating these households with respect, the respect that they deserve, is an important part of that social licence. But in return, they will be a part of an energy transition and they will be invested in that transition. So consumers have a vital role to play in the energy transition. By 2040, most of us will be net producers of energy, not consumers. Now think about that for a sec. We've generally thought of ourselves as a customer that receives an energy bill, that is looking to lower that energy bill. By 2040, most of us will be generating more power than we need and will be exporting it, and as I say, increasingly a part of the generation mix that is keeping the whole state going. Rooftop solar is also now the most common form of electricity generation in the NEM, and it will continue to do so. If you look at all of the predictions from all of the modelling for the ISP and AEMO predictions, that it will continue to be a part of that. And in Victoria by 2030, 7 gigawatts of rooftop solar alone. So that requires a rethinking of the role of consumers and their role in the energy transition. But it also means, as I say, that we need to start thinking about how do we optimise and coordinate these assets rather than thinking of them as individual assets that only benefit the homes that they serve. Which is complex, right? Because most of us are installing it just to benefit ourselves. An example of extracting more value from this is in the distribution grid is neighbourhood batteries. The government will support 100 neighbourhood batteries through grants to support their installation over coming years, $6 million to deliver 25 neighbourhood batteries across 20 towns. And these are examples of how we're able to connect local communities, to engage them around the energy transition, to enable local benefits, but also importantly, to allow for coordination and to increase hosting capacity for individual homes so that more of them can connect. If you think about that 30% of Victoria's homes that are connected to solar, that's about 50% in other jurisdictions, if you think SA or Queensland. And so there's still headroom in our view for people to take up solar. We certainly haven't met the low-hanging fruit yet. It's also clear that not everybody has been able to participate in the solar revolution. Not everyone has been able to participate for a variety of reasons, particularly for those sectors that are traditionally hard to reach. So if you think rentals, solar homes also supports rental properties. 5,000 rental properties have been upgraded. As a result, there's still plenty of work to do. Our Solar for Apartment program, which launched last year, has had overwhelming success. We're expecting about 2,000 apartment buildings to register in that first round. We've had more than 5,000 apartments register across 400 buildings. The application process here is simplified for owners, corporations to access a grant, which is essentially double the grant for individual freestanding homes, and it combines, for the first time, Commonwealth and state funding, so $1,400 from each, so $2,800 per apartment. Our first 5 apartment buildings are zero upfront. So in other words, we're paying $140,000 in government grants to the owners' corporation, and every apartment in those first 5 buildings will get solar for free. In about 70% of cases, they're paying about $1,000 for an apartment. So not exorbitant, but it means that they're able to participate. And about half of those apartments are also rented. So it's really important that we don't leave people behind, and we're trying to adapt our program over time, which was generally designed to focus on freestanding homes, to also get to some of these harder to reach sectors, because that also is important for social licence. We've also used our incentives in the last 12 months to provide grants to innovators who are able to electrify individual homes, developments, precincts and projects. and 7 projects have been funded with up to 2,000 homes benefiting from our solar PV and hot water rebates. It's $4 million in total, and a couple of examples that are trying to demonstrate electrification at scale. So in other words, either in new homes, new builds, new developments, as is the case with Global Energy Solutions, which will develop up to 100 homes in new allotments in Moe, just down the road. Next Generation Electrical, which is working with Mequacare, which is an aged care provider across multiple sites across the whole of the state, but also includes sites in both Traralgon and Garfield that are looking to electrify with both hot water and solar installed for individual residents across their aged care network. And AusNet, which has got a fantastic program that will launch in the Latrobe Valley, about 50 homes, partnering with the Gippsland Global Climate Change Network and also the LVA to support 60 customers. These are retrofits, which are incredibly hard to do, having done a couple of thousand of them in the Latrobe Valley and elsewhere in the past. With local partners, it's incredibly hard to do, but it is worthwhile and it is important to demonstrate at scale because retrofitting existing homes, which in Victoria are generally not well insulated, pretty leaky, not particularly sustainable, and even with solar costing a lot of money to run, this project will work with low-income households across 60 homes to retrofit those homes with electric hot water, insulation, PV, and then demonstrate the benefits of demand response and orchestration across those. So 7 fantastic projects, and again, trying to leverage and learn from our experience over the last 6 or so years, but also to recognise that the context for our work is continuously evolving and the importance of holistic solutions from an electrification perspective are important again. And then finally, an important way that communities can benefit and that they can engage in the benefits of renewable energy and solar, that over our program's history we will create 5,500 jobs, around 4,100 jobs have already been created around a range of programs that include training and workforce development programs, apprenticeships programs for women. About 20 women have benefited from those programs as both either new electricians who are now qualified or new plumbers, 6 new plumbers that includes home heating and cooling and HVAC plumbing qualifications, but also a range of different programs, about 8 different programs that support workforce development. And this is an important aspect of the program from a regional perspective, is that we talk a lot about the jobs that will come from energy transition, but in fact it takes some time for those jobs to be realised on the ground. We're already realising them with those 4,000 jobs. There are local businesses who are contributing to the program, who are benefiting from it. And these are real jobs, not just promises. They are businesses and people who are contributing to an energy transition and aspirations on a regional perspective that will continue to grow. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Steve, mate. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, everyone. That's the end of our first session today. If you could go off to lunch, please. We'll be coming back. Actually, we won't be coming back at... the speaker after lunch has been cancelled, but anyway, look at your agenda. Look at your agenda. We'll be back after then. Okay, thank you very much and have a great lunch.